We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're gonna get kicked out of being number 2, you're gonna go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a third grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're gonna get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, let me, since I haven't spoken on this, get a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 of our 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest. Which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives.
Today is Wednesday, December 8th, and the time is 9:05. The AB 3121 Task Force meeting is now called to order. Good morning. My name is Camila Moore, and I am the chairperson of the task force. Before we begin, let us have the staff do a roll call for attendance to establish whether we have a quorum. Parliamentarian Johnson?
Yes. Excuse me, Chair Moore,
Present.
Vice Chair Brown,
Present.
Member Bradford,
Present.
Member Grills,
Present.
Member Holder,
Present.
Member Jones Sawyer,
Present.
Member Scott Lewis,
Present.
Member Montgomery Stepp.
Present.
The task force consists of 9 members. 5 members were needed for a quorum. There are 9 members present. Madam Chair, a quorum has been established.
Thank you, members of the task force and members of the public. In the interest of time, we will go straight to agenda action item number 2, which is the public comment period. Ms. Aisha Martin-Walton, you may proceed. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair Moore, task force members, and members of the public. My name is Aisha Martin-Walton. I'm with the Department of Justice, and the task force would like to hear your public comments. The public comment period will be for 1 hour, and each person will have 3 minutes. Please be advised that in fairness to everyone, at the 3-minute mark, you may be politely interrupted and your microphone turned at doj.ca.gov. To participate in public comment this morning, please use the raise hand function. Locate the button on the upper right-hand side of the screen. On the sidebar, you will see the shape of a hand. Click on the hand to prompt the raise hand function. On our end, we will accept your raised hand. Then you will see a notification at the top of your screen to continue. You will have to click continue. You will then be elevated into the meeting as a presenter and automatically muted until it is your turn to speak. Please note that there is a 20-second delay between
Yes, Your Honor. This is Angela Jones for
as you're being promoted.
California
At the
Ortho
conclusion of your
Injury
comment,
Center.
or at the 3-minute mark, you will be muted again and return back to the level of
Angela
attendee.
Jones for
We will
California
accept the
Ortho
raise hand
Injury
feature as
Center.
they come in, and once the person in front of you is done, Trini Hurtado, also of DOJ, will say your name
Angela, Your Honor.
to prompt you, indicating that you may begin to speak. Okay, with that, Trini?
Good morning. The very first speaker is Tiffany Quarles. You have been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
All right. So good morning, task force. My name is Tiffany Quarles, and I am a co-chair of NAASD LA and an organizer with CJEC, the Coalition for Just and Equitable California. I want to first of all thank you for your hard work. This monumental task is not easy, so I appreciate your service on behalf of the community. I'm calling today because I made a request on behalf of our national organization, the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, that the task force please send a formal letter to President Biden asking him to sign an executive order for a presidential reparations commission to mirror what is happening with AB 3121. HR 40 is currently stalled in Congress, and even if it leaves the House, it more than likely will fail in the Senate. President Biden signing an executive order will help to keep the momentum for federal reparations alive. You as members of the First Reparations Task Force have influence and the ability to help convince the president to move on this. I ask that you please consider adding this request to January's agenda for the next task force meeting and ultimately make the decision as a group to please send the letter to President Biden. Once again, thank you for your groundbreaking work, and thank you. That concludes my statement.
Thank you, Ms. Qualls.
The next speaker will be Marjorie Melvin. Marjorie, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Marjorie Melvin, and I am a member of the Coalition for Just and Equitable California. I'd like to thank the chair and the task force for giving me the opportunity to speak. I listened to the entire proceedings on yesterday, and I would like to say I appreciate the work that you all are doing. I know that it's very, very challenging to listen to all of this and to deliberate. But what I'd like to say is that, first, it's very important that we call a thing a thing. Black Americans were not indentured servants. We were, they were, my ancestors were enslaved people. The slave trade occurred. These are words that we must use because we cannot allow people to not accept responsibility for their involvement in the slave trade. The second point I'd like to present is I really appreciated Professor Miller's comments on yesterday, and it appeared that he proposed that we or you all create a reparations program surrounding the category of wrongdoings and wrongdoers. And I believe, it's my personal opinion, that the professor's conclusion was a bit overbroad and was insufficient in addressing the issues facing Black Americans who descended from U.S. chattel slavery. I spoke on yesterday, and I mentioned Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, and I mentioned his position that any framework surrounding reparations should involve addressing descendants of U.S. chattel slavery, and it should involve lineage specifically. He felt that that characterization and that category would not subject the task force to dealing with the strict standard of strict scrutiny. He also believed that it was a race-neutral category. The last comment I'd like to make is that the 13th Amendment specifically gives legislators the right, it empowers Congress to end any lingering badges and incidents of slavery. It would be misguided as a matter of originalism to interpret the 13th Amendment as a mere historical curiosity whose sole purpose was accomplished with the end of chattel slavery, meaning that legislators have the right and are empowered to address the lingering effects of slavery, which you all can do. So I would ask that you remember Dr. Shirley Weber's intentions when she presented and pushed AB 3121.
Excuse me, Ms. Melvin, I'm so sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your sentence, but your 3-minute time has expired. But thank you so much for your comments, and feel free to submit any additional comments to the email address at reparationstaskforce@doj.ca.gov. Thank you very much. Trini, our next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Angela Nirvana. Angela, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Excuse me, Miss Nirvana, I'm so sorry, but your 3 minutes are up today. So feel free to continue to submit an email. Thank you very much. All right, our next speaker.
The next speaker is Friday Jones. Friday, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
I wanted to be on camera. Is that possible?
Yes, just turn it on.
I clicked the button. Am I on?
No, we don't. Oh,
There you are.
there you are.
Okay. Hitting my clock. Hold on. Let me get to Word. Hitting my clock with you guys. Okay.
No, we don't. Oh,
There you are.
there you are.
Okay. Hitting my clock. Let me get to Word. Hitting my clock with you guys. Okay. So, hi, I am Friday Jones. My name is Kansa Jones Muhammad. I'm the co-chair of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants in the Los Angeles chapter and founding member of a coalition for just and equitable California. I have worked in the entertainment space for most of my career. My brother is a member of a tribe called Quest. When I graduated from Howard University, I was hired by the group's business manager because I was Black, had an accounting degree, and 90% of their clients were Black, and they wanted clients to see a Black person that was qualified to do the job. The person that hired me is most known as Jay-Z's consigliere and was responsible for the growth of Roc Nation and Rocawear. The senior partner at the firm, father of actors Jonah Hill and Beanie Feldstein, told me I was too smart and that I was the kind of person that would learn the business and go open their own shop, but did not mentor me like he did others. I was trained in New York and Los Angeles offices, did not receive a raise for 3 years. I was put on a tax track instead of a business management track, which was my preference. I quit when I was transferred back to New York without medical insurance, and the tax manager canceled my last planned vacation during my pregnancy with my son, and I went into early term labor that weekend at 29 weeks. Business management like entertainment law, financial advisors, talent managers, talent agencies are predominantly white, male, Jewish dominated entertainment adjacent fields. There is a never-ending line of young Black music artists, sports athletes that are funneled into social and professional networks that are predominantly white, Jewish, and highly relational and often familiar. Accessing those spaces does not ensure your success. I went from that firm to a firm where my clients included the president of Paramount Pictures, the managing director of Goldman Sachs West, and I replaced the CFO for one of the wealthiest real estate moguls in Los Angeles. The CFO was making $150,000. I was making $60,000. At one firm, I even had a senior partner say to me, "You are a Muhammad?" I did not even know what to do or say to that because I had just been hired. I opened my own shop in 2010 and I walked away in 2013 because having a degree and 20 years of experience did not materialize into a business loan that would have taken my business from just being in the Black to the next level. This is my version of a career where I paid a hefty Black tax. As this commission formulates remedies, it has to look at the hiring and retention rates and include mandated promotions to management and executive positions, consider small business loans where having a degree or 10,000 expert hours has as much weight as a credit score and capital. Consider incentivizing not just film studios and owners, but adjacent professional businesses where Black professionals are underrepresented. Thank you.
And your phone is, thank you so much, Ms. Jones. I'm glad you were able to finish your thought. All right, our next speaker, Trini.
The next speaker is Tasha Henneman. Tasha, you've been unmuted. You may now speak.
Good morning, Chair Moore, Vice Chair, Dr. Brown, and task force members. It's good to be back. I saw you all in September. My name is Dr. Tasha Henneman, and I serve as Chief of Policy and Government Affairs for PRC in San Francisco, and also as the Director of the Black Leadership Council, which is a collection of California leaders from various sectors that seek to improve conditions for the Black African American community. We have members in our coalition who represent the arts and culture and entertainment sector. So we appreciate that you are researching and examining these categories, which ultimately impact our agenda. Historically, Black people have always experienced racism in the media and in the entertainment business, but with new technological platforms, the reach of racism is largely widespread. A 2018 Nielsen audience report shows that US adults spend more than 10.5 hours per day consuming media, and other reports demonstrate up to 12 hours a day. And this number continues to be on the rise since the onset of COVID-19. Research also shows that through cultivation theory, that long-term media exposure causes people to become more engulfed in a struggle to distinguish media from reality. And although cultivation theory states that high-frequency viewers of television are more susceptible to media messages and the belief that they are real and are valid, heavy viewers are exposed to more violence and therefore are affected by the mean world syndrome. And I say that in quotes, the belief that the world is far worse and dangerous place than it actually is. And although this theory may be controversial, we can't deny that from internal discrimination to unequal pay, as my sister just mentioned before me in her testimony, the challenges Black people face in the media industry are no different from what they face in other industries. However, the power of media and entertainment companies wield over shaping perceptions and influencing society that cannot be ignored. There continues to be the absence of Black representation in positions of power, and overrepresentation of Black people and criminality are coupled with the limited positive associations of Black people in the news. And so the content remains hostile, and we have to do something about that. So we are grateful that you all are here to do this, and understand that we are engaged in aware about the issues that perpetuate bias that can influence decision makers and administrators and others. So thank you so much for all of your work on the issue and for your time. And it's certainly impacting and affecting our advocacy efforts across many issues that impact Black Californians. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Henneman. Trini, our next speaker.
The next speaker is going to be Sharice. Sharice, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Sharice Cryer, and I am a graduate of the Howard University School of Law. In 2006, I used Barbary to prepare for the bar exam. The week of the con law lecture, my classmates and I marveled at Professor Erwin Chemerinsky as he lectured for over an hour on con law. He taught from a multi-page outline, which he memorized verbatim while we followed along. He did not miss a word or period. It was brilliant. I went on to sit for both the Massachusetts and New York bars that summer, taking both exams consecutively over 3 days and passed both on the first try. Thanks to Chemerinsky and my professors at Howard Law. I also went on to pass the California bar in 2011 using some of the lessons from Chemerinsky's lecture. So I was giddy when I heard several public comments yesterday mention that he suggested a lineage-based approach to reparations would survive constitutional scrutiny and legal challenges. He is the preeminent scholar on constitutional law in the United States. But also when discussing eligibility for reparations, he echoes the request of so many of us that have been making this request to the commission and to the DOJ, requests that have seemingly been ignored and openly rebuffed. On July 9th, 2021, I sent an email to the task force detailing the potential legal challenges to an all Black people are entitled to reparations approach. My question, was that email and others forwarded to the commission? Was the point taken into further consideration by the DOJ? How can the public ensure that email communication is being read and received? Also, yesterday, an expert witness asserted a race-neutral approach to reparations remedies would be one of the ways to help survive legal challenges. I ask how. This country has a history of giving reparations to specific classes. Tulsa Massacre reparations, Rosewood Massacre reparations, World War II internment reparations, indigenous reparations are all inherently race-based by their nature. I'd like to note the Holocaust Victims Act, established by Congress and executive order in these United States, allows payments to, and I quote, victims, their heirs, and beneficiaries. There is precedent for reparation beneficiary descendants to be paid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cryer, for your comments today. Trini, do we have another speaker?
Yes, we do. The next speaker is Chris L. from CJEC. You've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you so much. Wow, such amazing comments.
Chris L.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
You're very low.
Chris, I'll work with you in a second. We're going to move to the next speaker, and I'll work with you to get that problem resolved. The next speaker is R. Reed. You've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Good morning, task force. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So, admittedly, I was concerned about a meeting about entertainment in Hollywood because I think Black politics already gives too much control and consideration to celebrities and entertainment abroad. But I sat with myself and thought, what legitimate concerns can I find to speak of? And I think I have two. One, the trend of Hollywood importing talent from other countries while choosing to, it seems like, to actively ignore the source of talent from American citizens. This, of course, has broader implications as similar trends can be seen in STEM, Silicon Valley. But since we're focusing on Hollywood and entertainment here, there has to be a way that California, the task force can encourage California to create incentives for Hollywood productions to give favor to American workers. And if for some reason they feel as though the talent is not there, then invest in American citizens who want to be creatives. And the second was the Telecom Act of the 90s, which allowed large companies to swallow smaller radio stations, disaffecting Black radio stations in particular. This is of great concern because with the removal of our smaller radio sites, this not only has an impact on exposure to music and musicians, but also the way that the news is disseminated to Black people. If we do not control our media outlets, then we have less control over, sending out messages that is important to Black people, telling the news from a Black perspective, and then also considering that and is looking to engage with the community. If we don't control the media, then it gives less of less avenues for the task force to accomplish their mission. Thank you. That's where I will end my comment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Reed.
The next speaker is Brandon. Brandon, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can hear
Hello?
you.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to start by saying thanks for what y'all are doing, but just because you're Black, it doesn't mean you're entitled to reparations. Let me be clear about that. Delineation is vital to ensure the Black American descendants of slavery in California get their just due, as well as across the nation. Everyone is not entitled the inheritance owed to those who built this country for free and have gone through so much agony throughout the entire time. And while immigrants from all over the world, from many lands, get to come here and live the American dream, we've been living the American nightmare. We're being erased, displaced, and replaced all over the country, and have been continuously swept under the rug. So I think I'm gonna challenge you all to just, do what's right, and so we can move on and try to unite this country. Because until we're addressed, things will never go right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you so much. The next speaker is Dawn Page. Ms. Page, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, Cook Squirrel Dud Momo Rut Jug. My name is Dawn. Good morning, and that is Tut for good morning. I had a couple of things to say. First of all, is thank you to the task force. You are anointed and doing, of course, important work. I wanted to just echo the homelessness issue as it relates to mass incarceration and talk about just briefly that I can co-sign on knowledge of that. My brother has a record that's approximately 30 years old, maybe a little older, that he can't seem to shake. He works full-time, has an autistic toddler, and they are living in a hotel room. So just imagine all of the difficulties in getting services and not having a stable address, being able to make rent, but there being an old, redlining, a remnant of redlining, whereby he has to be able to make 3 times the rent in order to. But of course, his credit rating is impacted by, the multiple issues that come up with having a felony record as a Black man. I wanted to move on and say that I would really like to see the task force dive deep into the impact of immigration on the Black community. I'd like to suggest Dr. Carol Swain as someone to come and testify. Another person is Sasha King. She is with the American Sociological Association, and they are doing very important work on how this problem is extremely ignored. There's plenty of data that shows the extreme discrimination that Native Black Americans are experiencing, basically in every part of society, particularly matriculation into higher education and hiring. My concern with regarding entertainment is I'm concerned about the assassination of the Black family, Black male bashing, the promoting of the independent Black woman and Black girl magic, which I think just serves to justify and reinforce the ethnic genocide that we are undergoing, where we have more Black men in jail in America than China, Russia, Iran, any other country. And I just wanted to end with low-hanging fruit. Please, let's not delay on stating who is eligible. I think Dean Chereminsky put it quite plainly, and so I would have to question the sincerity and authenticity of anyone on the task force that would suggest that we shoehorn any other group into this claim, because that is surely going to make any legislation that comes of this dead on arrival. I think he was explicit and clear that African Americans and Black people are not owed reparations, but the descendants of U.S. chattel slavery are indeed. So thank you, and continue this great work. We're here, we're praying for you, and I am complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Page.
The next speaker is Aletta Torre. Ms. Torre, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Aletta Torre. I spoke yesterday. I think I'm on camera as well. I wanted to say thank you as reparationists and some of you that are abolitionists. I put in the chat 2 things. I'm from the Richmond Progressive Alliance, which is a city local wide here in, can you hear me? And
yes.
Also, I'm also put in there Spirit of Mandela, which was the international tribunal, the need for the global perspective as well. So I am offering as 3 solutions, hopefully that we bring in the international tribunal, that spoke of this highly with judges from outside the country. Use us locally. There are 482 cities, 57 counties in California. Put us to work. That means those of us that are progressives, those that are connected to law students, those of us that are community that can also bring briefs as well as storytelling, which is more of a political analysis. I think with those 57 counties, we would be gladly ready to support you in whatever you want, including the site visits that we mentioned that needs to happen in San Francisco and Marin City, where they just had the court case against the school system, and even in our city where we have the biggest refinery in California for those that have been most impacted, which are African Americans closest to Chevron. So please connect with us. Let us know when you want to put us to work, and we will, I'm sure, those of us listening will be ready as 57 counties or 482 cities to be put to work as working groups to support your work that you have. Thank you, Task Force, for all of your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Torre, for your comments today.
The next speaker is Tessia Harris.
Okay.
Tessia,
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, yes. Hi, my name is Tessa Harris. I'm a graduate from Evergreen State College. I just make this quick. This might be a HUD problem, but I think we need to also address the situation with Section 8 house vouchers. For the longest, contractors were able to build expensive apartments without building low-income apartment units for the longest time, which is mandatory by the state of California. What is now, since COVID has kicked in, it is mandatory that any property owner have to accept Section 8 vouchers. Section 8 vouchers for the longest time were not accepted by landlords, which was another form of discrimination. Now that Section 8 is, now that it's been accepted within this year because of the COVID-19 and also a large growing population of homeless people, there's still another loophole of discrimination with credit. Even though these landlords are accepting it, if you do not have a credit score of 630 or more, the units are not accepted. The second issue is the fact that when they are accepted, these people lose their homes. They still lose the opportunity of renting an apartment because there's delay in inspection. I understand that people in the Los Angeles housing all over are overworked, understaffed, but this is a really main issue that is a growing more population to the homeless population, what's going on in Los Angeles. I just like us to really keep a mind and keep a handle on HUD. I've confronted HUD with these issues, and so we can at least help people and have a less population in the homeless sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
The next speaker, we're going to try Chris L. again. Chris, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
You're very low. Your sound is super low.
But try. Go ahead and let's hear more.
I'll give it a shot, and maybe I'll just talk a little bit louder. So
yeah, there you go.
Right on. So thank you again for your work. You guys did a great job yesterday, and I know it was a long day. Okay, I know you went into overtime, but you did a great job. And I want to just thank you for erring on the side of transparency and openness with respect to the public chat. Shout out to the public chat. The public chat is back on and popping, as I can see. So I want to thank you for erring on the side of openness and on the side of transparency. Also want to just extend another invitation to you all and anyone watching and listening for our, and by our, I mean CJEC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, as managed and produced by both of our coalition partners, NAASD LA and ETM Media, our 5th community reparations meeting going on in LA this Saturday.
Oh,
I
we
think we
lost
lost
you,
him.
Chris.
Oh, how's that? You got me now? I think I'm back.
Yep, you're back.
14,
Speak louder.
1437 Centinela Avenue, Inglewood, California. This is at the True Vine Baptist Church. I'm going to get through this no matter what. True Vine Baptist Church, 1437 Centinela Avenue, Inglewood, California, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Pull up if you want to ask questions about what's going on with California reparations in person. Thank you, Chair Moore, for joining that meeting also this Saturday. Last thing, just want to thank every single person who's been a part of this from day one. And from day one, I mean, back before there was a California Reparations Task Force, I remember going into meetings and hearings back in 2019 to get this law written and then get the law passed in the years and months that followed. So if you were here from the beginning, no matter when you came in, I want to thank you. Your work has been tremendous. Look at what you've done. Look at what you've been able to accomplish so far. I know we've got more great things ahead. I'm going to stop right there. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank
Chris
you so
L, for
much.
your comments.
The next speaker is Lila Brown. Lila, you've been unmuted. You can now speak. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to bring more attention to the sports industry. I work as a sports agent. My agency is LB Media Group. We started in Atlanta, Georgia, and now we're here in Los Angeles, California. When it comes to educational institutions, just like the South, a lot of the universities, they discriminated, they totally excluded any Black students. And then for me, focusing on sports, that goes to the Black student athletes. So universities excluded students based on race, then it became race and gender, until it was realized that these universities could earn billions off the back of Black athletes, namely when it comes to college basketball and college football. These are considered revenue-generating sports. These revenue-generating sports uphold programs that are non-revenue-generating, such as lacrosse and water polo. These are sports that we are underrepresented. These are sports where we are under-recruited. Even if we have a Black water polo athlete, it is so rare. So allowing student athletes now make money, now families can make money off of student athletes through endorsement deals. Our athletes are still being overlooked. The greatest example of this is Gatorade with a Paige Buckers over at UConn. Their first ever endorsement deal of any college athlete, regardless of sport, was to a white woman, a young lady. So when it comes to endorsement deals, our student athletes are still being overlooked. There's still opportunities for discrimination. So that's what I wanted to touch on. This goes all the way back to Pee Wee football. They do these things under the name of amateurism, but there's nothing amateur about college coaches that are paid. There's nothing amateur about the billions of dollars that these programs make annually. And then also that college scandal, Black student athletes just are not able to do that. So I don't want to go too much into that, but sports touches so many areas of our lives when it comes to municipal matters. Like I said, all the way back to Pee Wee, to college sports, educational institutions, these arenas that come into our neighborhoods, knocking down Black homes and communities in order to put up stadiums that affects our people as well. So I just wanted to bring that perspective when it comes to sports and entertainment, and knowing that just because student athletes have an opportunity to make money now, there's still opportunities for discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Thanks for your comments today.
The next speaker is Tony Loken. Tony, you've been unmuted. You may now speak. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. My name is Tony Tinker Loken, and first I want to thank you for your continuous pushing and urgency to the DOJ to open the chat. This is a huge, huge move, and you need to be applauded because this is showing transparency towards the various communities, Black communities in California. That was such an issue in the beginning. And for the DOJ to make changes of the persons who is reporting out, that person's transparency and response to all of you is so much better. And I'm so relieved to see that. I do also ask that we begin to uplift the voices of all the people presenting to you from the public. I think that these voices add to your voices as well, and that the different communities throughout California are so vastly different with the different Black Californians. We have been presented as such, our Blackness is so flat, and we're not. We are of every stride, of every color, of every walk of life. And I think that you will need all of us to lock arms behind you and push this forward in each of the communities to represent what reparations will look like in each of the communities. So I'm now asking that you make space in the future public comments or in the future presentations that you're going to do to bring forth some of the best voices from the public and some of the best stories that you've heard from the public, to elevate that throughout the state. You have Black folks in Humboldt County who don't have a voice at all, whose voice has been subjugated for many, many, many years. Red Bluff, you know, there's Black folks up there. We don't think about that, but there are. Sacramento, LA, Fresno, San Diego, we all look vastly different in how our lives are impacted, so that I hope that you begin to display that multiplicity in future conversations, so that as we get up against the legal portions of this, that there is a realization that California, Black folks in California tell a different story, and that reparations in our 54 counties will look very different and could be a roadmap for the rest of the country of how best to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Logan, for your comments this morning.
The next speaker is Raina Butler. Raina, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning to the task force. And you know, this is thank you for actually allowing me to speak. I chose today to speak. Oh, and thank you also to all of you before I even get started. This work is so important, and I know it requires your time and energy, and you know, it is a sacrifice. You know, we are all making sacrifices so that we can somehow elevate, and so I just appreciate you all. And I chose today to talk because today was entertainment. I am a licensed cosmetologist in the state of California. I have been here since the year 2003, and I wanted to call in and sort of talk about the unions and sort of the behind the scenes people in entertainment, and sort of how we are forced to navigate within these previously very white strongholds of you know, this type of work. So when I first came here in 2003, you know, I've heard a lot of people talk about how a lot of there is very limited shows for Black people. We kind of go in waves, you know, there'll be some and then there won't be some. And in general, these hair and makeup unions and these behind the scene unions have been largely white membership, right? And so when these shows first started, like, Black people were just on TV looking crazy as hell because there was nobody who could actually do their hair and makeup. So there are 3 different ways that you can join the union. You either have to have like 60 documented days. That means you got call sheets and everything for 3 consecutive years. And then, you know, you have to pay your fees and whatever, and then they let you in. You can be hired on a non-union project that goes union, and then you just kind of get grandfathered in, or you can get a star request, right? And so initially when this happened, star requests were essentially, if you were on a show, if you were in the cast of a show, you could make a request to the union that your personal person could come on as your hairstylist or your person or key on your project or whatever, right? And that went on for years. When these Black shows started popping up, there were a lot of Black cosmetologists and hairstylists because there virtually were none in these unions, and Black people were just on TV looking crazy as hell, gray makeup, like all that kind of stuff, right? And so the star request thing started kicking up, and a lot of Black beauty professionals started getting into the union through the star request, right? And so when that happened, the previous membership started to sort of complain, like, oh, they didn't have to go through what we had to go through, even though these things were in place long before. I'm sure many of them.
I'm sorry, Ms. Butler. I'm so sorry to interrupt you on your important statement, but you've exceeded the 3 minutes.
Oh,
Thank you. All right, our next, do we have anyone else, Trini, in the queue?
Yes, we do. The next speaker is Cash Gaines. Cash Gaines, you've been unmuted. You now have 3 minutes to speak.
Mic check. How y'all doing? So first, I want to say that to me, reparations, and I know a lot of people are going to be calling in for entertainment. Sorry to go back to homelessness, but to me, I think there's some of the most important people who are some of the most voiceless at the same time. Reparations to me is about pushing our people into the future, not necessarily catching up. So I first want to start by saying that we are interested in Section 3 inclusion as well as Section 8 and the 850 credit score reset. But I'm the 40 acres and a Tesla guy, the update to the 40 acres and a mule, or at least 40 acres and an electric vehicle to have us in the future. I want to say this. $7.5 billion is about to be spent on electric vehicle charging stations under Joe Biden's new bill. $384 million of that is going to California specifically. California has the largest market for electric vehicles. Indeed, half of all electric vehicles in the United States are sold in California. I'm saying that by 2035, if Gavin Newsom wants it to be zero emissions, reinvest in the homeless population, reinvest in Black Americans through reparations with electric vehicles as an update to the mule to address that. They said by 2045 that it needs to be 100% clean energy. We as young reparationists in the Millennial Reparations Club have said that disproportionately, we're going to be building solar panels on our land to become the middleman to the sun and the melanin of California with this reparations claim. So do not forget that our reparations isn't just direct cash payments. It needs to be land so we can have access to solar panels so that we can have clean energy for the next generation built off of bills like these infrastructure bills. As well, I'd mentioned earlier that we want to be using recycled plastics from the ocean. Many youth have talked about building houses for these homeless on their 40 acres. So we need to set up some type of infrastructure there. And then lastly, it was mentioned over and over again how many highways were built through our neighborhoods. Instead, we want to have land with roads that we control, can police, and businesses that we own where people will stop with supercharger stations to recharge their electric vehicles and patron our businesses. And we'll take an electric vehicle as well since we're owed a mule. Thank you guys again for the space and time. And, oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. Our 40 acres, we don't want to be contiguous. I'd like to break mine up, for example, to have 20 acres up in the north for an orchard, an apple orchard or a wine orchard, and 20 acres in the south in Death Valley or someplace with a lot of sunlight so I can have a solar farm there. And again, these ideas are not only my own, but I appreciate you guys for the space, for the millennial voice to be heard. Thank you guys again. Peace and reparations.
Thanks, Mr. Gaines. All right, Trini, do we have anyone else?
Yes, the next speaker is Kim Mims. Kim, you have been unmuted. You may now speak. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to thank the task force for the hard work that you're doing and for giving us this space to share our, let our voices be heard and share our stories. It really is historical. I'm happy to be involved. I'm with the Amend the Mass Media Group, and we've been streaming all of the task force meetings and allowing public comments on our platform. And I'm glad to see that the task force turned public comments back on for full transparency. And, you know, I'm in the comments on the Blue Jeans and people are just posting resources and information. And it really is a great way for people to connect and share information. So thank you for turning that back on. What I want to talk about today is the film commission industry. And the film commission industry is like the first point of contact for producers making big budget films. They have a California Film Commission out there in LA, which is kind of the umbrella organization for the affiliate film commissions throughout the state. There are approximately 60 in California. And what I found through my research is that none of those film commissioners are Black. And the film commissioner is the highest office that you can hold in a film commission office. And none of them are Black except maybe one in West Hollywood. And we went directly to the source at the California Film Commission and said, hey, how many Black film commissioners are there? And of course, nobody knew who was Black anymore. They couldn't answer my question. They're like, oh, we don't know who's Black. But I had done my research and found that, maybe one possible might be Black. And that's just going by the name because he didn't have a picture up. So that's one thing. And here in the city of Sacramento, the Film Commission office was under the tourism agency, SCVB, Sacramento Convention and Visitors Bureau, for many, 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 many years. And I worked there in an assistant role from 2001 to 2007. Now, the Film Commission office under the tourism agency, they didn't offer any local, resources or support to local filmmakers. So with the city of Sacramento came to the community with a creative economy grant, looking for ideas from the community about what the creative arts community needed to bolster the community. I wrote a grant and laid out a blueprint for a city-sanctioned film office that would support local filmmakers. And this was in 2017 that I wrote the grant.
Ms. Mills, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but your 3 minutes is up. Feel free to submit your comments in writing through the email.
Okay,
I'll announce the email as well.
The next speaker is Karen Smith.
Trini, excuse me, before you pull Ms. Smith forward, I'd like to just give Ms. Moore, Chair Moore, a heads up. We have about 5 minutes. Trini, can you tell us how many people are in the queue after Ms. Smith?
After Ms. Smith, there are 2 others. So there are 3 more comments in total.
Chair Moore?
We'll take the last 3. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Karen Smith, you've been unmuted.
Hello, and it's actually Mr. Kieran Smith.
Mr. Smith. I'm sorry.
Yes.
We're
No
sorry.
Okay. No worries. Got it straight. Yeah, just want to introduce. My name is Kieran Smith. I'm a Southern California native, born and raised here, descendant of Black Americans from chattel slavery. My 6th great grandfather fought in the Civil War in the Black Cavalry, all Black Cavalry unit, 4th Regiment. And I just wanted to talk a bit about, and I'm also a board member of the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants here in Los Angeles. And so I wanted to talk a bit about the comments yesterday about eligibility, about Professor Miller's distinction of connecting wrong-based approaches, and then also what it means to connect it to lineage. The reason being, if you actually just take a Google search on the word lineage and look at the definition, it reads a lineal descent from an ancestor, ancestry, or pedigree. And in this, it's very much race neutral, as every person from every race has a lineage. And in turn, I think the lineage-based designation not only justifies the moral obligation to connect the reparations to those who've been harmed, it connects it to the legal challenge for the constitutionality here in California. And as well, it gets down to the very definition of the word lineage versus the idea of race, which race was in itself created to group people at a higher level and to erase individual perspectives, individual lines, individual families. Whereas lineage, by definition, seeks back to connect to those very things, which is a direct line to the harm-based measures of being able to assign reparations. So I just wanted to re-emphasize the work by Professor Miller and also by Professor Chemerinsky that's been spoken here, as it covers not only the legal basis, but the moral basis and the ontological basis, the actual meaning of lineage. So I just want to make sure the task force is just really aware of that, and just thank you again for all the really important and monumental work that's being done here. And, you know, for all of my family, you know, 6, 7 generations past it now, and my 3 kids coming along the way, like, this is increasingly important work. And to make it specific as possible is definitely needed. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thanks for your comments today. Okay, the last 2 speakers, Trini.
The next speaker is Ernest. Ernest, you've been unmuted. You have 3 minutes to speak.
All right, thank you. And task force members, I want to start off this conversation by thanking you guys for enabling the chat. I do understand the comments and concerns you guys expressed yesterday, but to Chris Lodgson's point, you know, I definitely want to commend you guys for erring on the side of transparency as it relates to the chat. I did want to also second some things that were mentioned earlier by my fellow reparationists and speakers. And so I would also, you know, like to, you know, request for the task force to potentially review the impacts of immigration and, you know, potential links from immigration to gentrification and how that has played a role on the progress of Black Americans who descend from slavery as it relates specifically to this reparations discussion. I would also like to encourage the task force, you know, to leverage the power that you guys do have and, you know, pretty much second the comments that Friday Jones mentioned, where, you know, you guys have the ability to possibly sway the president of the United States by way of a letter in the reports that are going to be published as relates to reparations. And you could even be the I guess, the major proponent to getting the executive order established at the federal level as it relates to studying reparations. Another thing that I wanted to second is, you know, I would also like to second that, you know, when we're talking about reparations, it's important that we tie the harms to those who suffered those harms. And if, you know, if we're looking at the history of America, you know, Americans who from chattel slavery, there is paperwork and there is documentation that we have available that could be leveraged that will assist us in, you know, proposing legislation specifically for that group, as well as identifying those who were harmed by the badges of slavery and slavery itself. And so, you know, I would just wanted to reach out to the task force to reiterate those things. I'll definitely be in communication as I, you know, continue to listen to these hearings and, you know, gain all of this information that is being by, you know, experts and professors in various areas. I also wanted to second the Chemerinsky comments as well. In my book, you know, if we made reparations lineage based, we're actually taking the steps that America is afraid, which is addressing the of slavery head on, rather than all of these programs meant to benefit various other groups that did not suffer the harms that were rendered in this country over the last 300 years or, you know, 200 years. So to end, I'll land with a quote from Martin Luther King. Our friends recoil in horror. The Negro should be granted equality, they agree, but he should ask nothing more. On the surface, this appears reasonable, but it is not realistic. For it is obvious that the man is entered at the starting line in 100 years. Another man have to perform some to catch up with this. Now, this is a that I believe task force for solutions.
Mr. Ernest,
Yes.
I'm so sorry, you're at the 3 minutes magic mark.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you for your comments today. And Trini, let's hear from our very last speaker of the hour.
The next speaker is Marcus Champion. Marcus, you've been unmuted. You may now speak. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Marcus Champion. I'm a board member for NAASD LA, as well as CJEC. And I just wanted to implore the task force to, if you look at undertakings similar to the task force throughout history, the most successful versions of these bodies didn't wait till the final proposal to make change happen. They used their influence and power along the way to get victories and just spark up enthusiasm among the people to let them know that it was real. So I want to echo the sentiments of my fellow board member Tiffany Quarles in the task force with California being the 5th largest economy in the world, to lean on President Biden to sign an executive order for federal reparations. Also, in the meantime, to also lean on the Congressional Black Caucus to correct the language of HR 40 to mirror that of California, which correctly labels the recipient class as African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States, to ensure that we follow the guidance of Dean Chemerinsky to make sure that federal reparations does not violate equal protection, just like we don't want California reparations to violate Proposition 209. Lastly, I also want to reiterate that we will be having a community meeting this Saturday from 12 to 2 p.m. at True Vine Baptist Church in Inglewood, my city, to go over reparations and just educate the community about what's been going on. And lastly, I just want to thank every task force member for this undertaking. It's not easy, it's a lot. And, you know, us here as community activists, as people who care about our people, we are here to support you in any way we can. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Champion, and thank you everyone who made a public comment this morning. We've reached the allotted time for public comment. If you are not able to provide comment, we invite you to attend future public task force meetings or to submit written comments or testimony via email at reparationstaskforce@goj.ca.gov. I will now turn the meeting back over to Chair Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha Martin-Walton and Ms. Hurtado for your assistance with the public comment portion of the agenda. So now we will turn to item number 16, witness panel number 4 on entertainment, arts, and culture. I will now introduce our esteemed panelists, starting with Ariane Edmonds. Ariane Edmonds is a 5th-generation Angelino archivist, curator, and founder of the J.L. Edmonds Project, an initiative dedicated to preserving the history and culture of the Black American West. She has curated exhibitions and presented her research about Black history, memory, and legacy at cultural institutions like California African American Museum and Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Her family archives stretch back to the 1850s, and her story as a keeper of her family archives can be found in the New York Times 1619 Project, The Root, and LA Weekly. Ms. Edmonds is currently writing her forthcoming book for Oxford University Press about the American Black press and her family's 20th century newspaper, The Liberator. In 2021, Ms. Edmonds became a senior civic media fellow at USC Annenberg, funded by the MacArthur Foundation, and appointed one of the newest commissioners of the Los Angeles Public Library. Then we'll hear from Dr. Darnell Hunt. Dr. Darnell Hunt is Dean of the Division of Social Sciences and Professor of Sociology and African American Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, my alma mater. Dr. Hunt has written extensively on race and media, including 4 books and numerous scholarly journal articles and popular magazine articles. He was lead author of UCLA's 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020 Hollywood Diversity Reports, which provide comprehensive analysis of the employment of women and Black Americans in front and behind the camera in film and television. Recently, he has worked as a consultant on film and television projects, focusing on sensitive portrayals of race, ethnicity, and other social issues. We'll also hear from Erika Alexander. Erika Alexander is beloved for her iconic acting roles as Maxine Shaw on Living Single. She's also won NAACP Image Awards as Outstanding Actress in a Comedy Series. She played Detective LaToya in Get Out, Cousin Pam in The Cosby Show, Perena in Black Lightning, Linda Diggs in Wu-Tang and American Saga. There's some feedback, so if anyone can mute, that would be great. Thank you very much. Bob Barlard, Run the World, and Meredith Lockhart, Swimming with the Sharks. Miss Alexander wears many hats, including actress, trailblazing activist, entrepreneur, creator, producer, and director. one of the country's boldest, most daring, and powerful voices. As creator, she recognizes that entertaining stories, when socially conscious and carefully constructed, have the capacity to create impact and meaningful change. As a co-founder of Color Farm Media, she is on a mission to bring greater equity, inclusion, and diverse representation to both media and electoral politics. And notably, Ms. Alexander also co-hosts a podcast on reparations called The Big Payback with Whitney Dow. Then we'll hear from Dr. Alison Rose Jefferson. Dr. Alison Rose Jefferson is a historian, heritage conservation consultant, and a third-generation Californian. She is a 2021-2022 Getty Conservation Institute Scholar in Residence. Dr. Jefferson is currently doing research on the historical African-American experience and public policies to conserve it in the California coastal zone of the Venice District in Los Angeles. Her recent book, Living the California Dream, African-American Leisure Sites During the Jim Crow Era, was honored with the 2020 Miriam Matthews Ethnic History Award by the Los Angeles City Historical Society for its exceptional contributions to the greater understanding and awareness of regional history. We'll also hear from Price. Price is proud to be from the West Coast. Coming up as one of half of rap duo's Audio Push, the Inland Empire native is a true visionary when it comes to the art of creating music, having worked with all of the industry's biggest names while still pushing his own solo artistry. On top of the music, he finds time to run 5 thriving businesses and still be a great father. Price has just released his first solo body of work, DLRD, a history lesson that will inspire Black people to trace their history and set confident tracings for the present and future. Price's pen has been pushed for many, including Mariah Carey, and it's refreshing to see song-making capabilities turn in his own direction. And then lastly, but not least, we'll hear from Kevin J. Green. Kevin J. Green joined Southwestern Law's faculty in 2020. Professor Green is a nationally recognized entertainment and intellectual property law scholar and an expert witness consultant for copyright, trademark, publicity rights, and entertainment contract disputes. He is highly committed, outstanding teacher, as well as a passionate leader and an IP law influencer. He teaches contract rights and copyright law, and he has written extensively on the intersections between reparations and the entertainment industry. So without further ado, I would like to turn to our first speaker, which is Ariane Edmonds. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the task force members in the California DOJ and all those who support behind the scenes for inviting me to present my family legacy and my views on reparations. You know, our world broke open after George Floyd and the start of the pandemic. And as a result, we've been given this opening, a portal to re-examine ourselves, our past, and make decisions about how this nation will approach repair and reparations for Black Americans. We know that co-creating reparation policies is a complex exercise, in part because we know the exploitation of Black American labor for hundreds of years is in direct correlation with America transforming into the global superpower we know today. So there's lots of unfolding and reckoning that's necessary for this restoration work to be done right. You know, it's my theory that when dealing with complicated, painful, and deeply rooted issues, strategizing and applying intellectual frameworks can only take us so far. Stories of our human experience and the things that tie us together have proven over and over to provide the keys to unlock some of the most challenging issues we've faced in history. So today, I'd like to introduce you to my great-great-grandfather, Jefferson Lewis Edmonds. We can go to the next slide. A formerly enslaved man turned newspaper editor, farmer, and civil rights advocate who dedicated his life to his family, his community, and to the advancement of a fulfilled Black American life. You'll hear about Jefferson using his newspaper, The Liberator, as a platform to combat local and national government policies engineered to restrict Black American rights and our ability to freely exercise our citizenship. So as I share Jefferson's story today, I ask all the task force members to bear in mind that many of the battles Jefferson was tackling in his paper, over 120 years ago, are some of the same issues we face today. And so my question for all of us is, how might we learn from his story as we approach this historic moment in national reparations? Next slide. But first, let me take you to Crawford, Mississippi. It's October of 1852, where Jefferson was born, enslaved on the Edmonds plantation. This is an article for the Los Angeles Times in 1909. So Jefferson was commissioned to write about his emancipation story. He spent this article describing the first day he found out he was free. So this man here riding in on his horse was his great uncle, who was telling everyone the war was over and they were now free. He describes this information being spread like wildfire. He talked about some of the men that were in the field starting to throw down their tools. And he said he remembered a woman next to him who grabbed her child and said, "You're finally mine. You belong to me now." He described the most beautiful scene. Some formerly enslaved families that had escaped neighboring plantations and were living in the forest. He described them pouring out from behind the trees and joining them for this huge celebration. But as we get towards the end of the article, he describes that celebration was short-lived. They all were coerced into signing a contract with their name, marked X, stay on the plantation as sharecroppers for many years after that moment. Next slide, please. After emancipation, and after being able to leave sharecropping, Jefferson in his early 20s, maybe late teens, I don't have all the dates fully yet, but he moved up north and attended the Freedmen Bureau schools and learned how to read and write, and became a teacher on his own. Next slide. And after the passing of the 14th Amendment, Jefferson began canvassing around Mississippi, encouraging Black men to vote for some of the earliest Black senators pictured here. And during this time, he was summoned before a Senate hearing in 1876 to testify about some of the violence and voter suppression he experienced while he was exercising, his kind of newly minted civil rights. And based off of what he's sharing in this testimony, you can see this unsettling, seeing people on their way to the ballots being murdered, being harassed. Next slide. And so I think his feeling that he could only accomplish so much staying in Mississippi and staying in the South, he decided to turn his efforts and become a Pullman porter on the trains that were heading westbound. And he saved up enough money to be able to bring his family to California. I do want to highlight some of the work of scholar and professor Alyssa Richardson of USC, who's done extensive research on the Pullman porters. So many of them moonlit as reporters and journalists, collecting news from some of the passengers on these first class cars, sharing this information within Black newspapers and writing about what was happening in the day. They also supported with distributing these Black newspapers to the South and encouraging folks to leave. Next slide, please. So with enough money in his pocket, he headed westbound with his 8 kids and his wife, Ida. So they landed in LA in the late 1880s. Next slide, please. It's there that he purchased several farms and bought land in West LA and Pasadena. He would later partner with Noah D. Thompson, who was like a Pan-African businessman and journalist. And they started a real estate company and started purchasing land and dividing them into plots and selling to Black families that were leaving the South and needed to find some refuge in the West. This is a picture much later, probably 1911 or so, of his kids on the farm. Next slide, please. So after writing for several newspapers, Jefferson launched his own paper, The Liberator, in 1900. And as you can see, he used his paper as a tool to help people guard their rights, help people prepare for civic life, 40, 50 years after emancipation. He would print ballots and champion for home ownership, women's rights, equal education for Black families, and the banning of lynching. Next slide, please. He often collaborated with Black thought leaders of the country. So this is a young picture of Booker T. Washington, who wrote pieces for the paper. And just to the left are images of Black business owners. And he would encourage all of his readers to patronize their businesses. And he'd write the most beautiful, elaborate bios about how fabulous the food was or how great the haircuts were. He wanted LA to be this new Black hub post-Reconstruction. Next slide. This is my great aunt Susie. This is Jefferson's daughter, who was one of his assistant editors on the paper, and together they really championed for not only civil rights for Black Angelenos of the time, but they included poetry and personal ads. They wrote about international news, national news, and local politics. Next slide, please. And so Jefferson actually had the foresight to keep every single every single piece of the leaf-lit paper and put each one of his papers and put them in bound books. And within these books, he kept them in volumes and handed it down in our family for over 100 years. And so in 2018, my father and I, Paul Edmonds, partnered with the Los Angeles Public Library and the California State Library Initiative, California Revealed, to have all of the papers digitized and offered as a resource for scholars and students and artists to learn about some of our early cultural architects of LA. Next slide, please. And you feel free to just kind of go through all the rest of these slides. These next few slides are all just opportunities that our family had with partnering with cultural institutions, with LA City Hall, and with different museums to start creating community activations, multi-generational educational opportunities for folks to interact with these archives, interact with this living history. We wanted folks to know that these stories aren't just things that should be locked away. These are stories of people who had families that loved this city and wanted something more. And I'll share with all of you, this is also one of my favorites. This is a piece at Hank's Mini Mart in South LA. We've partnered with all kinds of organizations to make sure this history is activated. And so in closing, I want to encourage all of you to also think about the legacy that you're leaving behind, the things that you want to be remembered for. Jefferson built his career around challenging the American political system. He spent a lifetime defining what true evolved Black American citizenship should look like, what it should feel like. When we think about reparations for Black people in America, we should also we should be thinking about not only individual funding and social programs that address the disparities around health, housing, and economic mobility, but in addition, we should be considering allocating funds for building Black-owned and operated cultural institutions, creative centers, community archives, and repositories that will help us stitch back together our histories and help us find our way back to ourselves. Our stories deserve a sanctuary, and not just for us, but also for teaching others about our collective past. So that the atrocities that we have experienced and continue to experience in this country will never happen again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Edmonds, for that incredibly moving personal testimony. So we will now turn to Dr. Darnell Hunt to provide expert testimony. Dr. Darnell Hunt, you may begin when you're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the task force for inviting me and for the important work that motivates this particular session. My name is Darnell Hunt, and I have studied the status of Black Americans in the Hollywood entertainment industry for nearly 30 years. I'm currently Dean of Social Sciences at UCLA and Professor of Sociology and African American Studies. Since 2014, I've been the lead author on a series of annual UCLA reports documenting the progress of people of color and women in front of and behind the camera in the Hollywood industry. Before this, I authored a series of reports for the Writers Guild of America West on diversity among Hollywood writers, a study on the state of African American inclusion in primetime television for the Screen Actors Guild, and I helped staff Hollywood interviews for testimony before the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights 1993 Los Angeles hearings in the aftermath of the 1992 uprisings. So I'm here today to testify about the significant impact that Black exclusion from and underemployment in the Hollywood industry has had on the group's position in America. First, it's important to consider that the Hollywood industry was born in the early years of the 20th century during the height of the Jim Crow era, itself a backlash against Reconstruction and unfinished efforts to address the damages suffered by Black Americans during centuries of American slavery. A product of that moment, the Hollywood industry was structured by the same doctrine of white supremacy that organized life throughout American society. Though recent years have seen some advances for Black talent in the industry, mostly on screen, white males remain firmly in control, calling the shots behind the scenes. Well, why does any of this matter in the overall scheme of things, given the very real challenges that the legacy of American slavery continues to pose for Black Americans in terms of economic, political, and social justice? Why should we care about how the group has been treated by Hollywood? Well, the answer is simple. While the films and television shows Hollywood produces are entertaining, they are much more than mere entertainment. It is no accident that one of the earliest campaigns of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons, NAACP, centered around protesting the highly popular and racist 1915 film, Birth of a Nation. The NAACP recognized the power of media, of the stereotypical and dehumanizing images of Blackness promoted in the film, to undermine its efforts to integrate Black Americans into a Jim Crow era nation clinging to the doctrine of white supremacy. Now, though the smoking gun of causation is often difficult to locate when it comes to the impact of media on society, there is ample evidence supporting the idea that heavy media consumption has a normalizing or mainstreaming effect, pushing consumers' understandings of the world in directions popularized in the films and television shows they consume. This effect appears to be strongest when media serve as a stand-in for real face-to-face encounters with others and/or in-person experiences with the issues that are being depicted in media. Indeed, concerns about this media effect motivated the advocacy group Color of Change, commissioned a 2017 study I authored exploring the role that race plays in the writer's room, the creative spaces responsible for producing the scripts that animate Hollywood's television shows. Among the more important takeaways from the study was the finding that Black voices were largely absent from these spaces for a long-standing and staple genre of network television, the crime procedural. Accordingly, crime procedurals were found to routinely glamorize policing and to legitimize the criminal justice system while downplaying the degree to which Black Americans are racially profiled and victimized by both. Now, this finding is particularly alarming given what we know about the normalizing effects of media, about the potential for media, in this case, to condition police officers, prosecutors, juries, judges, and/or vigilantes to perceive Black bodies as a threat and to police violence against them as justified. According to the US Census, Black Americans alone constituted about 12.4% of the population in 2020. And this was the last year examined in our most recent UCLA Hollywood Diversity Report. But among the mostly men empowered to make decisions about which films and television shows will be greenlighted for production, who will produce or direct them, and how large their budgets will be, Black Americans were largely absent. Indeed, there were no Black CEOs or members of the senior management team at the major Hollywood studios in early 2020. And only 3.9% of major studio unit heads were Black, like casting, marketing, etc. The numbers were better for Blacks at the television networks, but still well below proportionate representation. Here, 6.8% of network CEOs, 2.9% of senior management team members, and 7.5% of unit heads were Black in 2020. It should be noted that Hollywood did not welcome its first Black head of a major television network until 2016, when Channing Dungey was promoted to president of ABC Entertainment. But Dungey soon left ABC for a VP level position at Netflix. Among television show creators, the creatives who develop and pitch ideas for new TV series to the networks and studios, Blacks were just 4.5% of the total in broadcast and 7.4% in digital during the 2019-20 season. In short, the cost of marginalizing Black talent among those who call the shots in Hollywood is exceedingly high. Not only are Black managers and creatives deprived of lucrative employment opportunities, but the decisions of the white men who dominate the industry result in films and television shows that often fail to affirm the realities of Black life in America. Given what we know about the power of media to influence how we think about who we are not, and who we hope to be, this is a legacy of white supremacy that must be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Darnell Hunt, for your expert testimony. We will now move to Erika Alexander. Erika Alexander, you may begin your testimony when you're ready.
Hello, good morning, everybody. This is fantastic. I have to say, I'm really excited. So if you feel me, coming off this a little bit hot, it's just that I've been waiting a very long time to have the opportunity. I hope I'll do well. Here we go. Hello, my thanks to the California Task Force for the invitation, to Miss Alicia Turner for getting me here, and my friend screenwriter C.S. Trotman for her help. She helped me get prepared today. I appreciate the work to speak with you today. I've been trying to get government attention for a while, so if I'm here now, that means all my good troublemaking has not been in vain. My name is Erika Alexander, and I'm an actress. I've been an actress for nearly 36 years. You may have seen my work, and if you haven't, there's still time. Don't worry, thank goodness for syndication. But through the years, I've expanded my skill set and added to my resume. Now I'm a writer, producer, director, and co-founder of Color Farm Media. We call ourselves the Motown of film, television, and tech. And I had to learn those skills in order to survive and thrive in a business that has for years traded on toxic narratives that were designed to create me and minority communities as the other. We have made progress, and for that I am grateful to those who paved the way, and for abolitionist creators determined to destroy those stereotypes. But along the way, I learned a thing or two about being human and influencing narratives, so I can bear witness to the power of story as a mighty tool towards making reparations for African Americans today and in the future. So here's what I want to talk about. Storytelling. If you ain't in the storytelling business, you ain't in the game. Everything is about narratives, everything. And those who control the narratives control the world. Activists. I'll tell you what I learned from great activists who are for reparations and others who are against, why they tell the best stories and why that matters. Theory. Why storytelling is the vehicle to move hearts and minds of Americans toward reparations. And techniques. I'll discuss how key narrative devices help the medicine go down. Today, I'm here as a journeyman storyteller and explorer, returned from the front lines in Badlands called Storyville. And I'm here to tell you how to sell the story of reparations. To start, I'll tell you my story. It's an origin story. I worked in TV and film. Some of you may probably know me from The Cosby Show or Living Single or Get Out. You may know me as the producer of the recent Good Trouble, John Lewis documentary. There he is behind me. And I'm proud to be a working actor. I'm one of the lucky ones. Because before all of that, I was just a Black girl from the mountains of Flagstaff, Arizona. My mother was a teacher. My father was an itinerant preacher. They were both orphans. They had 6 kids. We lived in the Starlight Motel's 2-bedroom shack off of Route 66. It was tough, and we did a lot of dumpster diving. I started work around 5 years old, knocking on doors, asking for jobs, sweep the porch, or take out the trash. My brothers, they were stronger. They would shovel snow. And when they got it, a $20 bill was mythological. That was the way it was until one day fate stepped in and my father, a Kojic Pentecostal and Baptist preacher, was discovered by the German Lutherans. They thought he was special and sent him to the Lutheran Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. And life changed for me. Suddenly, there were more opportunities. My mother sent me to an arts program in the summer. And when a Merchant Ivory independent film came to town in the 5th week of that 6-week program, they held an open call looking for girls of color to audition. I, along with hundreds of girls from the tri-state area, showed up hoping for a miracle. When the smoke cleared, a miracle happened. They chose me for the lead. I was discovered there in a basement theater called New Freedom. That first job got me a union SAG card, health care, and a career. I was 14, and I've been trying to make good on being the one that got over ever since. Story. Now that you know mine, I'm no longer a stranger or just a face on the screen. I'm more human. And I believe in reparations for descendants for African Americans as a way to heal a nation that has yet to reform, repair, or apologize for its heinous history. Reparations will need creators and great storytellers to use their powers to lift it above the clouds. Storytelling is the most powerful tool for change in the world. See, most people cannot remember the details beyond the way something makes them feel. Story is the conduit to our mind, but once a seed is planted, it's the quickest way to our heart. My friend and mentor, Reverend William Barber II, is a master storyteller, the gold standard for the power of story and its might to create right. To have this discussion, I'll borrow his signature framework called the Third Reconstruction. In it is a moral, constitutional, and economic call for reparations. Reverend Barber, a MacArthur Genius Fellow, is senior pastor of the Greenleaf Christian Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina. He is also co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, started by Martin Luther King Jr. Reverend Barber says, I don't separate morality from economics. I don't think America can be if she doesn't ultimately deal with this issue, the legacy of systemic racism, and how it continues to hold the country back. Reverend Barber is the creator in this story, a world builder. He says, we are the architects of the Third Reconstruction. All right, now, just right there, you set up a little straighter in your seat, because with that one phrase, he recreates you as a character with a purpose in a more dynamic world. Our everyday ordinary just became mythological. He believes that you have to have a place to shift imagination, prophetic moral imagination, before you could have the hope of political and public policy implementation. In storytelling terms, he helped me see the arc's history. First Reconstruction after slavery, the second after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Reverend Barber gave me a perspective from slavery's end through civil rights to the turbulent journey we're on today. Now, slavery, its effects and deformities don't feel so far away. With that knowledge, Americans are assured a place inside history. That's what woke is, you consciously making history in your own time. Now, reparations are within our grasp. The challenge is to awaken others into joining this journey. The Third Reconstruction is in progress. Barber has the blueprint, he's given us the compass. Now we can start drafting. No experience necessary, but imagination is essential. We'll need that to move the reparations conversation forward. If this is the Third Reconstruction, then we are all the architects of it, all of us. Surely that is a higher calling, but be forewarned, if it only took reason to make a season, all our days would be 72 and sunny. But this ain't Hollywood. There'll be real Katrinas and other storms to endure. We can succeed, but we'll need to declare that we are responsible for a better tomorrow. Reverend Barber's superpower, and he has many, is shifting that every day to a brighter way. Reverend Barber declared this is the Third Reconstruction. Believe him, and let's get on our way. Our next master storyteller is Saru Jayaraman. As an archetype, Saru is a modern-day warrior, battle cat. In real life, she's the president of One Fair Wage and the director of the Social Movement Center at the University of California, Berkeley. And she leads an army alongside people like Reverend Barber and other grassroots justice organizations, working daily to advance the moral agenda and uplift service workers' voices on the historic and continued abuses of tipped wage workers. Saru's mission is to destroy the tipped wage economy, a holdover from slavery, and redress the tremendous gap in wealth between Black and white households. The effects of accumulated inequality and discrimination, as well as differences in power and opportunity that can be traced back to slavery in this nation's inception. She approaches this complex issue by telling us a story about a practice we all do that holds the nation's poorest people and women together in poverty. Tips, the powerful message for people to understand what's at the end of their fork and why it's there. Making the invisible visible is its own clarifier and can move many from day tripper down to from the cheap seats To the dugout. Our next master storyteller is a killer and a wordsmith. He uses his tremendous vocabulary and first-rate mind to chisel a new image for the lost tribe. Michael Killer Mike Rinder. I met him earlier this year when making our documentary and podcast about reparations called The Big Payback with my white male co-director, Whitney Dow. It's because of the podcast and not my killer smile, unfortunately, that I imagined I was invited here. But during those projects, we had great conversations with Michael Killer Mike Rinder, one of the best storytellers on this hot blue rock and a disruptor for social justice and a leader in Barbara's third reconstruction. As a rapper and activist, he has street cred, charisma, and bold appeal that's rooted in his authenticity. In storytelling terms, he's a shapeshifter and a trickster, able to move between class, commerce, and politics as an artist and intellectual. Michael uses his influence to reach a segment of America's most marginalized citizens, Black men, inviting them into a complex discussions that are engineered to benefit them, their families, and their communities, but they are rarely invited to contribute in a meaningful way. Michael is their emissary. He is able to convey a bigger picture of how reparations can empower them now, but also future generations to greater heights. He speaks to their aspirations to engage their appetite for imagineering, to borrow a Disney term, to create their future now. Sure, he believes in reparations, but his approach is holistic. He says, as long-term systemic purposeful organizations and systems set up and put, for the first time, Black people who were brought here as beasts and chattel on a pathway to having their full rights and privileges recognized and enjoyed. Through Michael's lens, we can also envision the greatness reparations can build in African-American communities, not just as cash payments, but through land grants and lotteries, plus exemptions from taxation, forgiveness of federal loans, and etc. If you begin with equal footing, as he puts it, then it's possible to scale to new heights. Only dare to imagine bigger, and we can, because he's a product and the endorsement. The message he's sending works precisely because it is aspirational and motivational. It cuts through the noise and confusion, and he keeps it relatable. There are and were others like him through the years, most notably James Foreman, who crashed a Sunday service at Riverside Church in Morningside Heights on May 4th, 1968, to deliver his Black Manifesto demanding $500 million in reparations from white religious establishments, or as he said, $15 a nigger. That woke them up that morning on his Straight Talk Express. Though these types of folks may make people nervous, we'll need more shapeshifters to shake it up and not hide behind politeness and respectability politics. Katrina Brown. Every great story needs its villain, and though reparations has many, our next storyteller volunteered for the position. Her name is Katrina Brown. Katrina is the descendant of the DeWolf family in Rhode Island, and they are the largest slave traders in North America. Katrina learned of her family's history from her grandmother and has since taken personal accountability for their actions. In doing so, she willingly placed herself in this story as her family's proxy for the brutality, greed, and evil of white supremacy. Katrina gives life to the ever-present white shadow hanging from sea to shining sea. To admit that her family was the largest slave trading family in U.S. history is a mea culpa of epic proportions. It's a powerful position and strikes citizens as participants in an ongoing modern conversation of slavery, racism, and its systemic nature, instead of past disassociation in a bygone era. Katrina and some of her family members even took a step to travel to Africa as an act of reparations to apologize for their involvement. That brings it home. No hide and seek there. Yvette Carnell's approach to some may be considered controversial, but her style and delivery are effective. Yvette Carnell is the co-founder of ADOS, or African Descendants of Slavery, and her buzzword is specificity. She is speaking to and for the defendants of American slavery only. The core of the issue is, who is eligible? Who's Black enough for reparations? That's what we call it on the podcast. Her answers would say to the folks who were harmed the most, the descendants who paid with flesh, blood, and pain, the hundreds of years money ball that created the U.S. endless revenue stream. Her words create excitement and exclusivity to that audience. She speaks in the first person to the first persons. She's on a linear quest, and she's a threshold guardian for a specific group, the the children of American slaves. She says, the descendants of chattel slavery have made a different and heavier contribution to America than anybody else, and did it unwillingly, and we got abused because of it. And we have a specific cost. Now, when you have a specific cost, that means a specific payment. Thus, they suffered what she calls an accrued disadvantage. She does not disavow the harm of slavery to others, but says those who came here voluntarily would not be eligible for reparations, but would have access to our Black agenda in terms of our collective lived experience. As we go along, we'll find reparations work is like a Rubik's Cube. We'll keep turning the tiles until they align in a way that makes sense, but hope that one day we reach a good consensus to make reparations a reality. Another effective advocate are the people fighting against it. Larry Elder is one such person. He is a conservative, and failed candidate for California governor. He's also a successful radio personality. Every story has powerful forces that work against its goals. In fact, Reverend Barber, the creator of our story word and the architect of the Third Reconstruction, asked me to quote educator and theologian Howard Thurman. The measure of a man's estimate of your strength are the kinds of weapons he feels he must use in order to hold you fast in a prescribed place. We know the type of weapons they've just deployed over the years. We call them good, bad guys, fate, karma, luck, but let's not assign a motive. Let's talk about the methods used to speak to the counter audience or the arch conservative Larry Elder fans. When he took the stage and made a case for reparations to the slave owners. Again, not to the actual descendants of slaves, but to their torturers. His argument, though specious, is effective with a huge segment of our country. As a storytelling tactic, that reversal or twist, it's awesome because it upsets expectations. By fighting against reparations and arguing for the slave owners for damages or reparations, he makes the entire subject radioactive. You've seen it happen before with critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and Black Lives Matter. Larry Elder says, like it or not, slavery was legal. Their legal property was taken away from them after the Civil War. So an argument could be made that the people owed reparations are not just Black people, but the people whose property was taken. So you may not dig that message, but the news outlets do, and so does Graham. That soundbite resonates with his arch conservative audience and liberals, especially because he's an African American. But the real benefit is that it sows chaos, doubt, and exhaustion in the entire population. Now the conversation is no longer about who's responsible or remedy, and being an unreliable narrator in a tragic comedy, he uses his exposition as ammunition. It's as good as shooting a firearm in a crowded theater because the effect is similar, chaos. How can you create possibility and make progress in that atmosphere? And that rhetorical device is reliable. It works, and it works. When it works, he's victorious, effectively reorienting and shifting blame on the victim and heaping empathy and a new perspective on the wrongdoer. Finally, this all brings me to a surprising turn of events in this 400-year slavery drama. And perhaps its most notable story I could tell you today about the determined young ingenue in this passion play, Evanston, Illinois, 5th Ward Alderwoman, Robin Ruth Simmons. Now, she's an all-star in anyone's playbook, and a first, like the moonwalker John Glenn. Dubbed the Rosa Parks of reparations, Robin did something no one has ever done. She passed the first reparations bill in American history. And in true heroes fashion, she did it in the year of the return, 2019, the 400 years since we arrived enslaved in 1619. It was an auspicious year indeed. Uniquely made for this moment, Robin traveled to Africa and came home inspired by the idea of reparations as a tool in Evanston, Illinois. Though she was a novice herself to the idea of reparations, she knew how to maneuver in her town's local political space. Tying its funding to recent legislation in Illinois, legalizing marijuana, she knew she had to move fast to assign a percentage of that new revenue stream toward reparations agenda for African Americans who lived in her city. It was a genius move because it did not require residents to pay or redirect city funds. And it tapped a new income source, drawing on that recreational marijuana tax revenue. Though she is our ingenue and hero in this story, she has the political instincts of a national player, using the element of surprise and capitalizing on the city's relative ignorance of the decade-long reparations debate and struggle. And she got the bill passed to an 8-1 mostly white council. She just put her head down, got it done. Like any hero, she has personal stakes and understood the dramatic disparity between the properties available to whites versus the lack of access for Black home buyers. And she became determined to help correct that inequity in Evanston. Their big payback is redressing discriminatory housing policies. Like all heroes, she's paying the price for her success: stress, death threats, anxiety, exhaustion. But she sees its worst because she says this is our nation history, not just Black history, which Evanston, the little town that could, proved when right-thinking white people were moved to action with historic results. Robin is preceded and matched in Washington, D.C. by the awesome Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee with her push for H.R. 40, a bill to study reparations started by the late Detroit Congressman John Conyers, and her successful passing of the new holiday Juneteenth. Now that is a storytelling engine of tremendous proportion. Again, the element of surprise in her favor, her opposing party passed the holiday. I see it as effectively getting weeks of marketing, branding, celebration, and education around the subject of American slavery, freedom, and the legacy that created conditions for it to flourish. In other words, it's critical race theory. They didn't see it coming. It's a Trojan horse. Story is a smuggler too, and it's the best smart power we have to change the world. If we tell a better, truer story, we can disrupt the evil story white racists have that tells him that he can murder us in broad daylight with impunity. We can change the narrative and rebrand Blackness to recreate us as human, so he will finally get his knee off our neck. One last nod to other interesting archetypes in the reparations fight, including the billionaire Tom Steyer, as well as the pioneers Callie House and Queen Mother Moore. Their stories and their ability to recruit partners and collaborators because of their storytelling ability made a way out of no way. We must see story as the first line of defense and the most effective offense we have to make progress. If we are to make a better world for reparations, we must tell a better story. As part of my personal journey and professional mission, I'll continue to do my part to create the conditions for change in the national reparations conversation for African Americans. Our success here and nationally will have global implications. Good. We end our story with the powerful, unvarnished truth, to quote the economist and professor Julian Malveaux, who was wary of using the term reparations too broadly or too narrowly. In her view, it must encompass awareness as well as compensation for what's been lost or rather taken. She says reparations is about justice denied and justice attained. So let us all seek justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alexander, for your thought-provoking testimony. So we'll now turn to our next speaker today, our next expert witness, rather, which is Dr. Alison Rose Jefferson. Dr. Jefferson, you may begin your expert testimony when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Okay, the slides, please. So I am going to continue on the thread of the importance of stories that have been hidden from view. I'm going to share with you today some stories about my current research on the history of the African American experience and public policies to conserve it in the Venice district of Los Angeles, California's coastal zone, and that are showcased in my recent book, Living the California Dream, African American Leisure Sites During the Jim Crow Era. For Black Californians, the beach areas I will discuss became sites of resistance in the social and economic development of attractive recreational space relatively free from white citizens' harassment from the 1900s to the 1960s. Recreation and relaxation are essential components of liberty and cultural equity, as well as contested ground in the struggle for freedom. Next slide, please. Intentionally, my work is a social justice action practice to expand knowledge for the construction of a more inclusive public culture, historical memory, and national identity, encompassing the diverse experiences of the American people, and to help dismantle institutional racism. This work provides enlightenment and inspiration and inspires change, as I hope the task force work will also accomplish. Your work the task force and my fellow colleagues today testifying, like mine, has to ensure there is a collective understanding of our diverse and multi-layered history that is learned by all in the public square. Your support of recognition of more diverse sites and creation of new public displays that acknowledge the underrepresented and challenge hegemonic and white suprematist narratives will help connect to a more representative history and identity, which can be a vehicle for healing and education, as well as cultural tourism in community. For this to happen, we need your support, the task force support, to increase equitable access to deep knowledge and from places that create and preserve our cultural record, and from scholarly texts to community collections in archives, libraries, and other repositories. The stories and materials of historically underrepresented groups must be included in these narratives and cultural records to ensure that more authentic, reflective, complex, and nuanced stories are revealed, presented, and told, as this helps build an informed, culturally diverse, and civically engaged society. The task force recommendations should include funding ideas for this important work. As we are seeing today, this knowledge can be useful to elected officials like yourself to shape our present and future. Next slide, please. These stories I will touch on have implications for our lives today, as we can see how the denial of benefits of coastal access historically and in contemporary times continue to be civil rights, social justice, and health issues. Places to play at the beach are not luxuries or amenities, but an example of a fundamental human right under the United Nations Declaration of the Child. California and federal civil rights laws guarantee equal access to publicly funded resources and prohibit intentional discrimination and unjustified discriminatory impacts. But there continues to be disparate impacts due to the legacy of discriminations past and current expressions, which must be overcome in providing opportunities for all on our coast and otherwise. Next slide, please. African Americans began moving in large numbers to the Los Angeles environs in the decades surrounding the turn of the 20th century, joining a multi-ethnic and multinational community. Of all socioeconomic classes, this new Negro generation migrated from United States southern to northern, midwestern, and far western parts in the post-World War I decades to escape the worst of racist anti-Black restrictions and violence. They were more self-confident and sometimes militant in demanding their rights as citizens and consumers. Like everyone else moving to the state, African Americans embraced the booster-promoted California dream of a leisure lifestyle as a permanent way of life in picturesque outdoor settings, a mild climate, and new life opportunities, even while discrimination and lax enforcement of California's civil rights laws, established as early as 1893, many times prevented them from using various public and private facilities and buying land in many areas for decades into the 20th century. Despite the challenges throughout the early 20th century Great Migration, African Americans actively participated in California's growth and nurtured a rich cultural milieu. Next slide. Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach in Southwest Los Angeles County, which has been in the news a lot lately, was an early successful African American residential resort community and day trippers' leisure destination, which began in 1912. Racial discriminatory measures aided by destructive use of state power in 1924 eliminated their residential and economic development with attempts to erase the site's memory from history. Next slide, please. The Bruce's Beach landlords and visitors were not alone in facing harassment actions discouraging African Americans from visiting and settling in particular beach locales as the region's population increased during the 1920s. In 1925, African Americans were forced by white-run civic and business groups to give up a development of a beachfront resort in El Segundo. The most violent intimidation campaign to evict African Americans from enjoying the beach was when white arsonists burned down the beautiful Pacific Beach Club in Huntington Beach shortly before it was supposed to open in 1926. Next slide. Activists mounted informal and legal challenges to these discriminatory actions endeavored by whites. Even with such violent attempts to evict African Americans from public beach space along the Southern California coast, this community's days of recreation and relaxation continued. Next slide. Although the Bruce's Beach community was raised, a successful National Association for the Advancement of Colored People protest and legal maneuver for unfettered beach access propelled African Americans' more confident assertion of their legal rights, which in the coming decades contributed to racial restriction attempts at public beaches fading away. This was an important civil rights and beach access victory, not only for African Americans, but for all Californians. Next slide, please. As the task force is aware, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed SB 796 to allow Los Angeles County supervisors to return the beachfront property they own to the descendants of the resort business owners, Charles and Willa Bruce, from whom it was wrongfully taken in the 1920s. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This restitution opens opportunities for the family to recoup generational wealth building that was lost. Some psychological healing happens for the lost opportunity for the family and the African American community generally. This is all good, but we must think more deeply about the events of 100 years ago and their legacy. Tangible benefits will not be provided to the purged African Americans of all classes from Manhattan Beach that lost out on a vibrant sociocultural economic space where today they make up less than 0.5% of the city's 35,000 population. For broader benefits to occur, elected officials like yourself on this task force need to implement socio-cultural economic public policies and programs that encourage African American community opportunities in Manhattan Beach and other California beaches. Next slide. In the city of Santa Monica, founded in the 1880s, African Americans were able to build a sustained community of landowners and renters that began a few blocks from the Pacific shoreline in the environs of the Civic Center and High School and Phillips Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, the first African American institution established in this city. A short way south, a Venice enclave also forming was considered part of this early Santa Monica African American community. Next slide. In the years surrounding Phillips Chapel's 1908 purchasing of its own building at 4th and Bay Streets, the oceanfront area down the hill around Pico Boulevard, south a few blocks to Bicknell Street, emerged as a gathering place where African Americans from all over the Los Angeles environs and beyond came to enjoy the beach's pleasures. While the boundaries shifted through time, it was a popular destination for many African Americans into the early 1960s. Next slide. Area establishments provided services and accommodations for African Americans from Santa Monica and elsewhere, particularly those who came to enjoy the Pacific Ocean a few blocks away. Black regional residents and Los Angeles entrepreneurs attempting leisure space service business development for their community were challenged by various white supremacist private hoarding of benefits and public policy measures inhibiting residential expansion and economic development close to the Pacific Ocean shoreline. Next slide. An example of this occurred in 1922 when a Black investment group led by Norman O. Houston and Charles Darden was blocked from developing a first-class resort and amusement facility along the oceanfront at Pico Boulevard. After they abandoned the plan, the property was purchased by white developers whose plans were approved, facilitating the construction of the iconic Casa del Mar Club, now a hotel, and another beach club, the Edgewater, now the hotel shutters on the beach, all before 1930. Next slide. Another high-profile act of white supremacist sabotage of African American coastal zone businesses occurred in the 1950s when Santa Monica city authorities rushed in to take over land through eminent domain proceedings for a purported parking lot, forcing Black investors to abandon the Ebony Beach Club project. These investors put up a giant sign asserting racial discrimination and tried to stop the city's proceedings in Superior Court, but lost. Now, the upscale Viceroy Hotel sits on the proposed Ebony Beach Club site at Ocean Avenue and Pico Boulevard. The city continues to own this site and derives economic benefit from the hotel's revenue and occupational taxes and occupancy taxes. A similar deal could have been done with the Black investment group. Next slide. The African American community of strivers, homeowners, and renters was pushed further inland due to the impacts of displacement from waves of urban renewal infrastructure projects and anti-Black housing practices. In contemporary times, this community has mattered in the reclamation of place and memory in history and heritage conservation programming that has been initiated by citizens and public officials. Local and national landmarking of Phillips Chapel and the Bay Street Beach Historic District, respectively, have engaged the public to learn about Santa Monica's historical African American experience in U.S. history. Next slide. Other contemporary programming such as Nick Gabaldon Day, California Coastal Cleanup Day, field trips for youngsters from inland areas, and the Belmar History Plus Art Project actively connect African Americans and others to more complex, culturally inclusive stories of our collective national history, heritage conservation issues, beach wildlife appreciation and watershed stewardship, as well as aspirations to environmental justice policies involving beach access issues and social action intersecting with beach recreation. African American youth and those from other marginalized groups living in California inland areas in some of this programming get the chance to have introductory surfing lessons as part of the beach recreation experience, which opens up new ways for them to realize their full potential as human beings. This programming helps to make these local stories more visible and shows the struggle for cultural equity along with social, political, and economic issues reshaped the long freedom rights struggle. Next slide. The Los Angeles, go back a slide, please. Next slide. The Los Angeles Venice district of the California coastal zone, in this area, African Americans began formulation of a small neighborhood around 1910. These landowners and renters first worked for the white-owned amusement business and opened small service businesses. Living a few blocks from the Pacific Ocean, this enclave continues to endure today due to its historical determination and skills of contesting and navigating discrimination. It has experienced waves of gentrification over the last half century. The most recent wave, next slide please, of high-income white employees, high-income whites employed in the entertainment and computer technology industry are buying up properties and indulging wealthier and whiter tastes, which have had a more visible impact in marginalization of the Venice district's African American middle class and lower income homeowners and renters. Today, gentrification is not only creating a change in the character of this Venice area by reducing its racial, social, and economic diversity, but city politics are allowing the erasure of the historic legacy of the Black pioneers and their descendant community. Next slide. Public officials such as yourselves need to lead implementation of policies and programming to recognize and maintain this African American residency and legacy in Los Angeles's Venice district. In California coastal cities, African Americans have not obtained the full cultural, social, and economic benefits that could have potentially been developed because of the impacts of discrimination over the decades. They have faced waves of anti-Black discrimination and actions of economic sabotage by white supremacy to diminish Black wealth building from private practices and public policies. People living by the beach have the opportunity to make inroads into ocean sports historically rooted in whiteness in Southern California, which could be important to various types of socioeconomic attainment. African Americans continue to be marginalized in their abilities to experience these opportunities due to lack of access. So African Americans have contributed to the region's social, cultural, political, economic milieu, and to making the colorful history of California. We have a right to historical and cultural sites, a place in the American identity, and the joys of cultural expression and self-fulfillment, along with access to clean air, clean water, and enjoyment of all of America's natural and socioeconomic resources. Next slide. In closing, all tools of public policy, education, conservation, and curation available must be used to expand knowledge for the recognition of underrepresented and the disempowered in the redefining and reconstruction of a more inclusive public culture, historical memory, and national identity, encompassing diverse experiences of the American people, and to help dismantle institutional racism for greater equity and justice in cultural and socioeconomic attainment for all Californians. I think that the Reparations Task Force can help us do a lot of this with their recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jefferson, for your thorough expert testimony. We really appreciate it. Now we'll turn to artist Price. Price, you may begin your testimony And you have 10 minutes, and you may begin when you're ready. Thank you so much for your presence.
How y'all doing? I appreciate you all for the opportunity. You know, make it short and sweet. My name is Price, Government Larry Lee Jacks Jr. I've been blessed to be a part of the music industry since I was 17 years old. I got my first deal at 17 in the beginning of the streaming era, before it was even a thing, with a big, massive hit called Teach Me How to Jerk with one of my best friends. Since then, I was been blessed to just work with lots of different artists and, you know, people in the industry, from Mariah to Brandy to Travis Scott to Wyclef Jean, too many to name. It's been an incredible experience. But it's also taught me a lot of different things just about business, about being an American African in this country, being an American African in business. It's taught me a lot of different things. And a few things that I learned, and I just wanted to speak about. I'm from the Inland Empire, which is an hour east of LA, for those that don't know. I'm in California, and I've literally lived almost every city out here in the IE. But I was exposed to reparations and racism early. I mean, from 5, 6, 7 years old. On my street, my grandmother lived on Edmonds in Banning, California. We lived directly next door to a family that were a part of the KKK, a full-fledged, authentic, racist family. Since I was a child, I grew up next door to them, fighting them, all those experiences. And then 2 streets over was the Morongo Indian Reservation, which, you know, we could walk to the reservation. It was walking distance to my grandmother's house. I'm 31 years old now, and I've never been on the reservation, still to this day. The reservation was blocked off by a border, you know, like almost like border patrol, a little border, couple guards, and unless you had an Indian reservation pass, you were not getting on that reservation. I said that, I spoke on that because we went to school with these children. You know, we went to middle school with these children. So we got to experience the total difference in lifestyle that they got to experience, good and bad, right? And so, but for me, it was important because I always used to just think like, dang, you know, it's just small things like being 13 and kids are at school with $1,000, you know, or, you know, they're getting limos to school, you know, different, just, we got to experience a lot of wild things. And then all of them had the luxury of knowing, hey, when I turn 18 and graduate high school, all I gotta do is graduate, and I got $13,000 coming to me, bare minimum. And I always used to just think that was so strange. I was always just mind blown by that, you know. And I used to wonder, like, well, you know, our people were killed too. Why don't we get anything? This is, you know, my childish thoughts. But it was just like I got to be exposed to the benefits of reparations and it being a real thing early. So saying that, just fast forward now because I don't want to, you know, take up too much time. My family, we moved. I love one of the speakers who went so deep on her history. She crushed it with her family history in the slides. She did so amazing. I like to draw back to about 2 generations within my family, which started in the Bay Area, San Francisco. My family, my grandmother, my aunties, my uncles, they all were a part of the Jim Jones experience. They were all in the churches. I have cousins and uncles that have nothing bad to say about Jim Jones because they do not know the man that went to Jonestown and murdered all the people that he did. One of my aunties and one of my newborn baby cousins died in that massacre as well, which inspired me to do what the Queen Erika spoke about, which was get into storytelling. I couldn't agree more with the power of storytelling. It inspired me to write a book and create a book series called Generational Cures. As you can see on the cover, it spells curses, but one of the S's is crossed out. And it's Generational Cures. I'm the first in the series, Little Larry, but the purpose of this book is to immortalize my family, tell all the different stories of my family members, create financial legacies, build, residual income for my family members that never would have ever think that their stories would have been told. I have family members that became schizophrenic after the massacre. I got family members that became drug addicts, drug dealers, et cetera, et cetera. So my mission, and just briefly, I'm very passionate about legacy. I'm very, very passionate about Black ownership. I'm very passionate about residual income. I'm very passionate about owning shit. Excuse my language, but I'm not here to be all playing games and be all sweet. Own you something. I know we're going to get reparations. This is not something that we're sitting here with 150 participants in a fairy tale world about. This is 1,000,000% going to happen. And the key that I believe is very important right now is financial literacy and building that as much as possible within our communities. I'm very passionate about that in the music industry. I'm very passionate about spreading the awareness of reparations in the music industry. You'd be surprised how many American Africans in the industry don't realize what they have coming to them, and what they should be fighting for, what they should be spreading awareness for, even within our industry. So many American Africans that are millionaires that can, really help push the agenda, and they just don't know. They really don't, because it seems like a fairy tale. They weren't exposed to what I got to see as a child and see is a reality. Like, no, this isn't a fake thing. People are getting scary amounts of money monthly to do nothing but be who they are based on what, the massacres and the just scary things that happen to their people in this country, and our people experienced 100 times worse. So I don't want to take up too much time. My name is Price. I love all my people. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Camila, for this experience. Thank you for inviting me. I'm just blessed to be hearing all of you all's takes and positions, and I'm here, and I look forward to learning more, becoming more involved in the movement and anything that I can do. And I thank you all for the time.
Thank you so much, Price, for your moving personal testimony. We really, really, truly appreciate it. So now we're going to move to Professor KJ Green. Professor KJ Green, you can provide your testimony when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Can I be heard?
Yes. Would you like to be seen as well? If so,
yes.
Turn your camera on. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it's on.
I don't see your face, so.
Okay, let me try it on this because I'm using the phone and the computer. Okay, how about now? Is that
yes,
better?
We can see. Yes,
okay, good.
You.
Okay, thanks. I want to start out by thanking the task force and Camille Moore for putting on this amazing testimony. I've been blown away by the panelists that I've heard. I mean, just brilliant presenters today. So thank you so much for doing this vitally important work. And this is truly history in the making for an idea whose time has come. By way of background, I am a professor in Los Angeles at Southwestern Law School. I live in Hollywood. And prior to becoming a professor, I was a practicing attorney. I've been blessed to represent some very iconic clients as a lawyer, including Public Enemy, Eric B. and Rakim, Bobby Brown, and of course, more recently as a consultant, the great George Clinton, the King of Funk. And I'm going to focus my remarks mainly on the music industry today. I think Professor Darnell Hunt ably showed how segregation exists at really disgusting levels in the film and television industries. So I'm going to talk more about the music industry. So if you will indulge me, I'd like to play a song, and hopefully the technology will allow me to.
I think he dropped. Professor Green, I'm not sure if you're still on, but we can't hear you or see you anymore. I just texted Professor Green. He should be back on shortly. Okay, Professor Green, I see you're back on. Can you hear us okay? Okay, you're back on. We see you, Professor Green. So you wanted to play a song? We see you on video, but we can't hear you if you're trying to speak. Are you trying to speak? We cannot hear you. Is there any way a staff member can assist Professor Green?
Trini or Noel, can you see if you can help Mr. Green? He is listed as a presenter. Let's see.
Mr. Green, it looks like you may have dual monitors. Is that the case?
Doesn't look like he can hear us.
Yeah, I'll try and chat with him on the back end.
Oh, thanks, Trini.
Yeah, he's on the computer and his phone at the same time, so I'm trying to. Is there a way you can just use one device?
I could, but I don't think the computer is affecting it because the audio never worked on the computer. And when I say it says your video is muted on the phone app.
We can hear him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my phone. I can play through my cell phone.
Oh, that's creative.
Technology is not cooperating.
If you all can hear, I can just use my cell
We
phone.
can hear him.
Sorry
Yeah, we
about
can
that.
hear him.
The song I played was Bessie Smith, and I played it because back in 2008, I wrote the first article on reparations in connection with copyright law. And I'm not going to talk much about copyright law today, but I would suggest that I think that there's going to be an interface between this task force and the federal government later. There's tons of work that needs to be done in reforming U.S. copyright law because I call it copyright scandal, the treatment of African-American artists under copyright law. So we all know that the American mountain of black creativity, and yet the remuneration awards for that have not been present. One thing that I talked about in my article is that we're not talking about slavery. We're not talking about something 200 years ago. We're not talking about some old problem which doesn't exist today. We're talking about ongoing appropriation of African American music and lack of compensation and credit for that music. The way copyright law works is any work after 1926 is still under copyright. And so all of those works from 1926 going forward, we just saw this with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which was done on Netflix.
that was a Ma Rainey is now in the public domain. But the value of these astronomical. Know that many of the artists who created this work were never compensated and were not even given credit for their work. And I saw that in my connection with my work with George Clinton. Been horribly treated not only by the American music industry, but by the courts. There's a tremendous judicial ability in our federal courts when Black artists come to courts to get theirs. So these are all problems I think that best. The innovators in science and other fields, Thomas Edison, Bill Gates, now today with computers, these Steve Jobs, they all became billionaires. But African Americans, greatest innovators in the American music space, the greatest of them, including Jelly Roll Morton, Bessie Smith, Arthur Big Boy Crudup, they all died so poor that they didn't even have a headstone to be buried with. Meanwhile, all of those works that we're talking about are still making money for the American entertainment. And the compensation hasn't been paid, and many times has never been paid. So we're talking about a source of money, which is still continuing. And the injustice of it is glaring, right? It's not some problem from 200 years ago. It's a problem that's ongoing and happening today. And I think that that has to be pointed out. The music industry is doing great because of digital distribution. It's great for the labels. It's great for Spotify, Pandora, and the like. Not great for the artists. And so we continue this kind of cycle of Black creation, Black either non-compensation or undercompensation. I also talk about in my statement how there's a feeding frenzy of companies buying up old Black music. They're buying up all these old catalogs. It's movies from the music from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. The hip-hop catalog is for sale. Death Row, the record label, was sold to Hasbro, the toy company, for $350 million, right? And so, and my question is, okay, great. So Hasbro has acquired the Death Row catalog. What about the artists on Death Row? We know that even Tupac Shakur wasn't paid by Death Row. And so all of these assets, which are generating hundreds of millions of dollars for the American music industry and for Wall Street, are racially tainted assets that demand some compensation. And I think California can do that at the state level. They can say that when you're doing these catalog sales, you've got to make sure that the people who actually created this music were paid for it, because they were not. Most recently, BMG, one of the major record labels, did a review of contracts from their so-called legacy artists, Black artists. And they found, surprise, surprise, that there were significant disparities in terms of how those artists were paid and how white artists were paid. And BMG is saying that they will now make contract adjustments. The music industry has done that from time to time. This is not reparations, by the way. This is not reparations. This is just giving back money that they were unjustly enriched by. What reparations would look like, in my mind, would be reparations for past injustices, for music, as I said, that is still ongoing and making money. Also, it would include future investments by the American music industry and the entertainment in the African American community, but at the direction of that community. You might have heard that during the aftermath of the George Floyd killing, that Warner Brothers, Universal Music, and Sony all made some contributions to African American organizations. However, I applaud them for that small step in the right direction. However, that is not reparation. To be reparations, there has to be equity in the music industry, including, as Professor Hunt said, in the boardroom and in the executive suite. That's sorely missing. And there also has to be investments in the community itself. I don't want to take up too much time, but let me just say a couple of more things. Everybody knows that the music industry and the entertainment industry, or rather the movie industry, is losing money because their refusal to actually cast movies with diverse casts. In fact, one study found that their refusal to do that is costing them $10 billion a year. So now I want to speak to my friends in the entertainment. I have many at record labels, at video game studios, at motion picture studios, because we're going to need allies in this fight. We can't do it alone. And the people I know in the copyright office, these are people of incredible goodwill. They're not racist people who are trying to hold us back. But that's not how institutional racism works, right? It doesn't matter, what's in their heart. It matters that we have this system. I think if they could understand that providing recreation entertainment space actually help them double and maybe even triple their revenues, they'd be interested in that. And the reason I say that is there's this untapped creativity in the African American community. There's fear, there's loathing of even people releasing their works because they know about what a ripoff the music industry is. There's a lot of untapped potential which is there. And if reparations were paid for these past injustices and also as a symbol of good faith of things going forward, the industry would actually make more money. Go on TikTok, go on Instagram. It's all fueled by Black youth. Black youth are fueling the entertainment industry from top to bottom, from fashion, from movies, from music. And so I think one way to get the people on board who we need to get on board is to have them see that, yes, it's the right thing to do, but it's also going to be very profitable. I'm going to close with a quote I put in my statement from Dr. Martin Luther King, great Dr. Martin Luther King. And here's what he said. He talked about reparations, right? In his dream speech, it was right there, in there. It was hidden, but it was there. And here's what Dr. King said. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note, insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. This is Dr. King on reparations, an idea whose time has come. I've now concluded my opening statement. Thank you for inviting me.
Wow. Thank you so much, Professor Green, for your expert testimony and apologies for the technical difficulties. We're going to move into the question and answer period, which will last until noon, and then we'll part to lunch. And so hopefully we can get your audio together for the question and answer period. If not, I'll just keep my phone on. But I do see from on one of your screens, one of the mic is muted. So I don't know if that could help if you tried to toggle it, but I know you already talked about that before. So it's okay. So now we'll move on to the question and answer period. Are there at this time, any members of the task force who would like to make a comment based on the testimony presented, or to ask a question to our esteemed panelists based on the information presented? And if you would like to be recognized, just speak up because we have a lot of speakers and Blue Jeans doesn't allow me to see everyone. Member Bradford, you are recognized.
I just want to thank the presenters and especially Professor Green, Attorney Green, for his just closing presentation. As an individual who spent 20 years in and around the music industry, everything that you state is still alive and well today. And I make a great point that, again, paying folks what is owed is not reparations. It's due compensation for the work that they did and that America is still benefiting from. So as a legislator who, like you say, helped with fair pay to play for the college athletes, I was the joint author of 206, making sure those athletes who, the majority of them were African Americans who put butts in those seats for $1 billion sporting industry. Please let me know what we can do to help further these wrongs, or should I say correct those wrongs that have happened in the music industry. I just met with Warner Music and Sony just 2 weeks ago because they're concerned about this contracting, the 7-year obligation. So I would love to hear your thoughts on where we are with that issue, if you're familiar with it.
Professor Green, would you like to respond?
Yes. Senator Bradford, is it? Senator.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to get your title right. Are you talking about the statute, which we have in California, which says that compensation has to be paid for contracts that are 7 years or longer? Yes, but there are, and workarounds around that. One of the things they'll do is they'll just say, because most of the industry is here in California, but there's also substantial parts in New York. One of the ways around that is just to do New York contracts. It's only state law. But I agree, that is a possible avenue to saying, okay, we have to correct these wrongs by saying that retroactively there wasn't correct compensation paid on these agreements. And, BMG did do that study. However, they haven't released the results to academics like me, which would be very, very helpful. Because I no insult to BMG or any record label, but I don't think you just what was actually in those contracts and what the difference was. So one of the things I would encourage, maybe there could be legislation encourage them to release those results. BMG invited every other major label to do the same thing, and I don't think any so far have actually taken them up on that, right? Because they realized that, a lot of these artists weren't paid at the federal level, though. Federal level, most of the time these people can't get copyrights. They couldn't get copyrights in their work, or they had false copyright registration, like Barrett Strong. I have tons of examples of that. So, in order to unravel this, it would take a comprehensive look at all these different things, our copyright system, our system of contracts, and also making it a national project ultimately, because I could very easily see Alabama or Utah or a conservative state saying, hey, you don't like California, you don't like the way they're regulating you, come to Utah, come to Alabama. So we need a national dialogue on this as well. Thank you so much for that, Cindy.
Thank you. Would any other member of the task force like to be recognized at this time?
Yes, Camila, it's me, Jovan.
I member Scott Lewis, you're recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your presentations today. From issues with the NCAA to the music industry and the film industry, what we're seeing is the continuous exploitation of Black labor. That has been a continuous process since emancipation. We've seen the same kind of labor exploitation in new forms. So I want to ask, and we're seeing it also in these, broader circuits. I can't help but think about how, African-American cultural production is at the basis of what we think of as global popular culture. And I see that especially in contemporary practices around, say, South Korean musical production, right? We see the DNA of Black music in, at the heart of that genre. So I think I have a question really, for all of you, but I want to kind of use Professor Green's framework of property, copyright, to think about what broader areas of cultural property, right? How might we think about all of these areas as a domain or within the domain of cultural property, right? Because I think copyright, you're right, Professor Green, and there are limitations, there are challenges, but how do we open up the scope, right? Where I think everything that the presenters have talked about today does fall underneath something of a protection of cultural property. Is there a means by which we can shore up that category? And I'm very curious about that, because once we think about that, then what we have is something that can be protected. We understand that cultural property, especially in native cultural areas, right, are often very protected. How do we have something like that that can be qualified and can be protected for African Americans?
Dr. Darnell Hunt, would you like to take that question first?
Yeah, let me say a few words about that. I mean, I think that's an important point. For me, one of the common threads that unite a lot of what I've heard today on this panel in terms of testimony is really respecting, affirming, reflecting, circulating our humanity. Really honoring our experience. Ensuring that it's understood, that it's not misrepresented. That can be through music, it can be through storytelling, it can be through like the way we document history, and that's erased in many cases by people who don't want us to know that history. So for me, that's what it's all about. That's what culture is. It's about respecting and affirming and valuing the experiences that African descended people have had in this country, what they've had to endure and what they've had to overcome. And all too often, the people who kind of control the process by which those stories, those experiences get circulated don't look like us. And they're often not motivated to tell the stories or to embrace the music and the other cultural forms in ways that are affirming to us and that celebrate our humanity. And instead, it tends to denigrate us in various ways. It tends to marginalize us. It tends to stereotype us, and it's often exploited for profit on their end. And we don't often get to share in that. Not that we want to share in our own dehumanization, but it's like a double whammy. And for me, that's what kind of unites a lot of what we've been talking about today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that. Would any other panelists like to address a member Scott Lewis's question around cultural property?
Alison Rose Jefferson. So as I said in my presentation, one of the big things that we need to see to that is done is that we need to have more areas of knowledge production available from the standpoint of archives and collecting materials and what have you, because those are the places where the stories are coming from that are getting presented on television, that are getting presented in movies. And if we don't have those repositories, and if we don't have the scholarly text, then we are at a loss in terms of going forward for how to substantiate making this claim in terms of the Western American system of what is important. And there's lots of materials out there, not to say that we have to always buy into archives as the way to validate our culture, but it is one way to validate our culture that we don't have enough of. We don't have enough money being put into developing things like this. I mean, we have our major cultural institutions in terms of UCLA, in terms of California, UCLA, and other places, but we don't have any real dedicated archives in California where there's funding that is being developed. So that's something that the Reparations Task Force should, look into. We don't have as many displays in terms of public displays, monuments, those kinds of things, where people can learn about the heritage in terms of the public square. So those are the kinds of things I think, I hope that the task force will, consider in terms of funding.
I'd like to say something real quick. It's Erika Alexander, because I love this conversation. Absolutely, Professor Kevin Green and Senator Stephen and Darnell it's the truth. One of the things that stops progress the most is that every time we go to make something, we have to pay an arm and a leg to do it. Doing the podcast, many of the things that we looked for were archival, whether it was James Baldwin or Malcolm X, and they're owned by huge corporations. And it stops us from creating the types of stories we'd like to, documentaries and things like that. People ask why we're outside of those things. Well, maybe because we're not funded, certainly, but also because getting a hold of those types of things, we're often paying people who at the time did record them, but own all of that archival material. And I'd like to say something about the legacy family stuff. Professor Green, we are now trying to do something to produce something about the legacy families, to tell their stories about how these things happen. So it can be a blueprint for other artists to avoid it, and also to create some kind of connection and conversation within the industry so we can stop it. This is generational wealth rape as far as I'm concerned. And we just need to be as aggressive as we can toward it. And certainly people are afraid to speak up. They think there's going to be a blowback. They won't be able to do the things they need to do. And also I just want to say that whatever I can do in that space, I'd love to, because it's probably one of my most frustrating things to see all the work that we've created for the world, the biggest culture makers in world history, as far as I'm concerned, 13% of African Americans, and have very little ownership of it. It's atrocious and it's outrageous, and it needs to stop. So thank you.
Thank you. Members, oh wait, sorry. Before we go to Reggie Jones Sawyer, Kevin, Professor Green, you wanted to respond, and my mic has to stay on. I'm sorry for any audio issues. Kevin Green needs my audio to respond.
Yeah, I just want to say to Mr. Alexander, I mean, said about him, we have to awaken him. And there is going to be pushback against it. It's going to be pushback, and it's because they're going to look at it, I can tell you in the music, exactly the opposite. Yes, I don't know if I could be heard.
Did y'all hear that? Did you?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
You can, but it's kind of low.
Oh, it was low, Professor Green. Did you just want to repeat quickly?
Sure, quickly. I said, Ms. Alexander, I love what you said about awakening young people. That's going to be a key part of this. And I'm hoping that this committee gets, and this task force gets a lot of publicity. I did reach out to a Rolling Stone reporter who said he was very interested. I don't know if he was able to make it. But you're absolutely right. We have to awaken others, and we have to make them see that this is not something from 200, 300, 400 years ago. This is something that's ongoing and happening today, right, as we speak. And I also just want to acknowledge Dr. Jefferson. I didn't know so many of those things. I'm new to LA. I was just blown away by that history lesson you gave us about discrimination in the leisure industry. Thank you so much.
Before we go to the next question, I just want to add that being someone who has had to work with cultural institutions and figure out where our family archive was going to be housed, the process was painful. And we were, I don't know, I want to be able to describe this in a way that's still fair, but I think that the work also has to be done around making sure that legacy families have the support that they need to be able to have their materials housed in the right place. I know you know this, Dr. Jefferson, but the Mamie Clayton archive, which was one of the biggest, at least on the West Coast, also, is now at Dominguez Hills. And so we do have spaces were private that belong to us. We also have this in church basements and, at grandma's houses. So we have already been collecting and preserving our story as best as we could. I do think that the goal is then to make sure that we have ownership and support to keep those archives in a place that's cared for by us and not just by the state and all these government institutions that are sharing what they think is important and not us.
To my point, why the task force needs to put some money into this area.
Thank you.
I would just quickly add, the task force will not be funding this. That would be a challenge of the state of California. And
yes,
I think that's what Mr.
but you will be presenting ideas to the state of California legislature, and hopefully the ideas that you present to them will be implemented. Thank you, Senator Bradford.
Thank you so much. Member Reggie Jones Sawyer, you're recognized.
And this has really been a good conversation. This really didn't, let me put it this way. I remember watching television one day, and Paul McCartney, the Beatles, kind of made a remark about the Rolling Stones being a very good blues cover band. And it struck me like, what does that mean? And then I started investigating blues singers. And I realized a lot of their songs came from our blues, African-American blues legends that they made popular, and they became superstars, making millions, possibly billions of dollars off of I think the word had been used, the treasure of our people and what they did. And they didn't get paid for it. And I saw I started researching and found out they didn't get paid for a lot of things that they did. And there were even white jazz musicians who tried to take responsibility or take claim that they did the music. And I just remember from 1984 when I was in college reading from George Orwell, where he said, "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." So as long as they can control the scenario of what the entertainment industry is, it becomes very difficult for us to get full, not only equality, but I would love to work with someone to come up with a methodology that at the very least, we get the full acknowledgement for what our people has contributed to this industry, and that it's almost like it's been covered up, like the Tulsa massacre. It's all, I mean, I don't really want to put it to that level, but I feel like it's to that level that our contributions have been pushed down so that others can be lifted up. And so if we don't lift up our own people, and I don't know what form that is, and I'll work with Senator Bradford and I, because we're probably the only two on here that can possibly do something statewide, to try to come up with, whether it's an institute, a methodology, but also financially, how can we make sure that the people who've exploited this, that we can get that money back into our community so we can create more Jelly Roll Mortons in the world, and individuals like that who are considered the father of jazz. How do we do that and do that in a substantive way so that those individuals who have that talent can grow and prosper? I don't know if that was a response, or if they just somebody want to say they want to come and work with us or whatever, but we do need to do something.
That's fine. And if I can piggyback on that. Go ahead, I'll stop. Go ahead.
No, please, go ahead, Susan.
I just want to piggyback. I just want to piggyback on the archival discussion, and that's critically important. And one of the things that I will be working on, along with the Black Caucus, will be working on as a priority next year, is Allensworth. Not only is that an historical town that was taken from African Americans, but it has to be archived. People don't understand the importance of Allensworth and the fact that it's a state park. But if you visit it today, it's at best a ghost town. So those are the things that this legislative Black Caucus will be working on in conjunction with this task force. When you talk about archiving our history, we have a phenomenal Secretary of State who's responsible for us being here today, it's in the Secretary of State's department and office that is responsible for state archives. And I know this is a priority for Dr. Weber to make sure that our stories are better told historically as far as land, contributions and all that. So we're in a perfect situation right now, and to come up with some clear, concrete solutions and directives. But the timing is right, and all what you're saying is vitally important, that we do need to document our contributions and try to right some of the wrongs that have happened. So the Black Caucus is committed to that.
Yeah, I'll commit UCLA and our group that does the Hollywood Diversity Report. Anything you want to know about Hollywood and ways that we can again document Black contribution to Hollywood and lack of recognition, we're willing and able to kind of work with you on that.
And may I say one thing? I really have to say this. I've been talking about it a lot. It's the ongoing inequity of pay inequity. And Monique talked about it a little bit with her Netflix so-called scandal. But what she was talking about was what Lily Ledbetter was talking about. And if we are tied to algorithms that are inherently racist to our pay and all sorts of things that judge us for being not worthy of higher salaries, you have people like Octavia Spencer Steele and Viola Davis saying how little they make considering their contributions, and next door to people who have done less and achieved less. We've done that over the years all over the place, and there needs to be data studies that disrupt this investigations that revealed this bad behavior, the continued epic salary disparities. They plague their limit our success, and it's a big issue. And we also must look to the fact that we are losing our artists, Michael Jackson, Whitney, Prince, all these things, to the type of health disparities and drug situation, which I think is reparations work. There's a lot of things that contribute to those types of things, and one is them not being able to have access or money access and things like that. You're talking about some of the larger ones, but there are tons of other people who go missing every day. When I say missing, they just fall away, and it's a talent drain. And so that would be great for data studies, to just go in there and reveal it. I think it would blow people's minds to see what newcomers make right next to people who've been in it for years and who built this billion-dollar business alongside and cannot get the salaries they deserve or the attention they deserve or the marketing or the branding they deserve, right next to people who are pushed forward every day. So there you go. I'm glad I got a chance to say that.
So, thank you so much. We have one last question from Member Grills, and then we'll get last comments from the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists for all that you've shared this morning. This question is for entertainment and sports panelists, but it is actually relevant to the leisure industry as well. There was a pioneering Black men of the Yale class of 1970 study done by a Harvard professor, and he found something very abnormal. At a deeply disturbing rate, they were dying off by around age 60. Among the 32 African-American men of the Yale class of 70, the death rate appears to be roughly triple that of their white classmates. And there's one concept that kind of captures what might be going on to some extent, John Henryism, which is a determination among these men to succeed even at the cost of their health. So applied to today's topic, at the request of Black leadership in the Location Managers Guild and also some consulting I did with a couple of production companies, I was really struck by the intense level of racism-related mental anguish and emotional distress experienced by Black folks in trying to do their work in the midst of all of the things that you have described today. My question is, are you aware of any studies, and can you then send them to us, studies or findings similar to what was found in the Yale Black Men study about the psychological and or physical health harm and quality of life harm, like substance abuse problems, family disintegration, resulting from these types of issues that you've shared today?
Any particular panelists like to take Member Girl's question?
Well, you know, I can't speak to specific studies, but I have a colleague at UCLA, African-American sociologist who works in public health, who studies the stress associated with racism, discrimination among upwardly mobile, middle-class, manager-type people. In other words, the finding was that in some cases, the stress they face is even more severe than working class Blacks face, because they're actually working in environments with with white people who create all kinds of anxieties and pressures, microaggressions and things like that associated with the status that they've attained. So when you talked about the Yale graduates, I mean, that immediately, I immediately thought of her research, because I think it speaks to what may be going on with them. And stress, as you know, is like a precursor to all kinds of disease, hypertension, heart disease, you name it. So that's an important issue. I think there is a body of literature out there on that.
I would just say that I think your point is something which needs to be studied further. We certainly. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Dr. Grills, thanks for raising this point. I mean, my work now, all these intellectual property deprivations, they actually hurt people. And they end up destroying their careers as well. So mental health toll is tremendous. I was listening to the singer who talked about Jelly Roll Morton. I mean, he spent the last years of his life in LA, actually, wandering the streets of LA, pretty much homeless and indigent. And this is the creator, as Senator was saying, if anybody can claim they created jazz, one person probably couldn't, but it would be Jelly Roll Morton. So, yeah, the toll of this on people is enormous. And I think that's something that's understudied. Because like Professor Hunt, I don't know of any studies that really address that specific issue.
Thank you, Professor Green. So we'll take last comments from Vice Chair Brown. Go ahead. And just, we're mindful of time. We're 6 minutes over, so we're going into our lunch period. So Vice Chair Brown, you're recognized.
Madam Chair and members of our task force, and to our, I just say so rare, so gifted panelists. I want to shout listening to all of your testimonies. And I want to underscore one thing along with all the great things you've said. Is we must go back to the scene of the crime, the ground zero of this discrimination, even in Hollywood. It goes back to the Dutch Reformed Church and the Anglican Church, who gave spiritual respectability, distorted respectability, to the notion of race. And as the scripture says, judgment should begin in the house of the Lord. It was religion that buttressed and gave strength to injustice being perpetrated against Black folk. Let's move fast forward. I heard one presenter mention about Birth of a Nation, but not many people know that it was Thomas Dixon, a Southern Baptist preacher and lawyer from Charlotte, North Carolina, over there near where Brother Barber lives. I heard the young lady reference Barber. But they don't say enough about the fact that it was Thomas Dixon who wrote that novel, The Klansman. He was the writer that inspired Griffith, D.W. Griffith, to produce that movie, Birth of a Nation. And right now, today, the reason why I would suggest we're not being able to deal with race in America is because the so-called white evangelicals don't know anything about Jesus of Nazareth. They've been about nationalism, racism, colonialism, and all of those isms that have been mean to persons because they're different. So I hope that as we go forth and talking about how we got to this point of there being such injustice is perpetrated against those who are in Hollywood. It all began in the spiritual community and in the so-called church house.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Brown, for that historical context. That's very informative. Are there any last comments from our esteemed panelists at this time? Okay. Thank you all so much for your time and your presence. Namely, I want to thank Ariane Edmonds, Dr. Darnell Hunt, Erika Alexander, Dr. Jefferson, Price, and Professor KJ Green. We truly appreciate your personal and expert testimony, and we're looking forward to staying connected with you all and building on this incredible work that you all are doing. Without further ado, we will recess to lunch and we will return at 1 p.m. Thank you very much. And also I want to say thank you to those who have been respectful in the chat and who have been using the chat to share links and resources and information. When we return at 1, I just want to make the statement, continue to use the chat positively. We do not condone any harmful rhetoric, whether that's racism, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, xenophobia. We do not tolerate any of that language. And so continue to use the chat in positive ways. And for folks who cannot do that, we respectfully ask you to take that rhetoric offline. Thank you very much. We will reset at 1 p.m. Thank you to our panelists.
See you on the Glow Road.
Thank you.
Well, family, there you have it. Day 2, part 1. Ooh, wait, was this not fire, family, or what? Okay, so while they're going on break, I get to share with you guys my comments from the top of the hour. Now, if you were here from the top of the hour, forgive me because I unmute during my court session and I muted when it was time to comment, and I was trying to keep my ear on both things, the judge and the task force meeting. When my name was called, I was all discombobulated by that time. I was in the queue from 8:09, but they didn't call me till around 4th or 5th. So I want to read to you guys, since you missed it, what I was able to get in before my mic was shut down. You know, I only get 3 minutes. And that's very difficult when you're born to talk. But here we are. So my response this morning was in response to the comments made by the task force yesterday. Okay. And so I said the following. The Color of Wealth LA report, copywritten in 2016, states the median net worth by race was as follows. Japanese, 592,000. Asian Indian, Kamala Harris's people, 460,000. Chinese, 408,200. White, 355,000. Filipinos, 243,000. African blacks, 72,000. Vietnamese, 61,500. Latinos, 42,500. Koreans, 23,400. Although at the time of this study, we were 44% degreed as compared to Mexicans who were 17% degreed, our median wealth was $4,000 as compared to Mexicans who were $3,500. Of the $3 trillion household dollars shared by all Blacks in the country, which is comprised of 90% freedmen, 10% Black immigrants, 2.3 trillion household dollars are shared by the 10%, while less than 700 billion since COVID is shared by 90%, which is majority freedmen. The median home price in Los Angeles is $790,000, with a median net worth of $4,000 back in 2016 when the Color of Wealth LA was copywritten. It's less now. If we are fortunate enough to own a home, do we have the income to qualify to borrow against the equity, to start a business, or to educate our children? Absolutely not. This is why we are forced to sell our properties, land, and mineral rights to other groups, Mr. Jones Sawyer. In the July 12, 2018 New Yorker by Ada Obi, Tricia Nawabani writes, and I quote, Nawabani Ogogo, my most celebrated ancestor, my great-grandfather was a slave trader who gained power and wealth by selling other Africans across the Atlantic. He was a renowned trader, not trafficker. My father told me this proudly. He dealt in palm produce and human beings. And now, said Africans in LA, per the report, copywritten in 2016, had a net worth of $72,000 to Freedmen $4,000. Who knows what it is in 2021? Contrary to our elected officials' belief, a rising tide does not lift all boats, just that of whites and immigrants who eat from the wealth generated with our ancestors' lives, as we are clearly in the fight of our lives to prevent the genocide that's been planned for us since our ancestors fought for and won our emancipation. Furthermore, if you're going to start changing terms, please know what you're talking about. Do your research. The Africans clearly traded us into slavery. Let's not whitewash our own history. White folks do that enough. We need enforcement and protections once we procure freedmen reparations. For example, if you lynch us or burn down our new Black Wall Streets, you should serve a life sentence without the possibility of parole in a maximum security prison because death is too good for you. We need our own anti-defamation league to fight anti-Black racism. It should be a crime of white students and white parents to bully our children into the highest rates of suicide in the world. So that's where they shut my mic off. I know they couldn't wait until the clock ran off on my 3 minutes. But this is where I'll pick up the next time, in January. As for the diabolical entertainment industry, it's abhorrent and sad that freedmen are so poor that they'd rather sell their souls to Hollywood and the music industry. It's anti-Black racism backed by white and immigrant money. It's abhorrent and disgraceful. Yet another eugenist plot to genocide freedmen and to whitewash our history. And why are Africans who descend from slave traders being cast to play freedom iconic foremost legends when freedmen actors need work? Do you see the botched creative license Hollywood takes with our history? Are they allowed to do this with any other group's history? Erika Alexander, great commentary, but Sheila Jackson Lee won't even allow freedmen at the table of our own repair. We've been campaigning hard for edits to HR 40, and with the help of NARC and NCOBRA, we've been locked out of participation, punished for being the founders of the former ADOS movement, not the one presently led by Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. Additionally, how are you praising a Hauser voucher for 16% of Blacks? I don't even know if they're even freedmen in Evanston, Illinois, being passed off as reparations. We are in the middle of a pandemic with a new variant being marched out monthly. And when your median income, your median net worth is less than $4,000 since COVID, in a state that costs $100,000 per year just to survive, you hardly have time to attend 2-day task force meetings in person. So there you have it. You got a little bit of what I said. Hi, Shirley. Hi, Danielle. Hi, Miss Powell. Hi, Tansy. Hi, BB. I hope I got all y'all. You got what I was able to say before they cut my mic. I was trying to reclaim my time. They cut my mic. I know they were happy to do that. And you got a little bit about what's in the framework of my brilliant mind that's coming for January, okay? You got a sneak peek because it's not over, okay? We will be back at 1 o'clock. I'm going to bring y'all back live. I won't be in the chat for a couple of hours. I got to go decompress after all this puckery. I am just over it. It is so traumatizing, but necessary because it strengthens my resolve. Turn down for what? Turn down for what? I don't even understand why everybody ain't as turned up as me. But we got a long road. It's a marathon, not a sprint, family. I thank you so much. I want to tell you, in case you can't come back for another half of your day, yes, we're going hard in the paint till probably after 5 o'clock. Okay. We're going hard in the paint. Then I'm going to be on the radio at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, Pacific Standard Time. I pray to have the information to share with y'all so y'all can tune in. Well, I don't know about California, child. They're probably going to get more Z's. But on the East Coast, family, I want you to call into my hour. I'm standing in for some amazing comrades in the East, and I'm excited to do so. I'm going to make myself go to bed tonight. Yes, I am. So I won't sound like a frog in the morning. But anyway, I love y'all Black and Strong. Let me pray us out and play the outro, and I hope to see you back at 1 o'clock sharp. Well, 12:55, because I got to play my intro. I think that messed up this morning, too. Lord, y'all forgive me. Let me explain. This is Freedman life. I am juggling everything. I had to get the kids off to school. I had to be in court, and I had to be on here to listen for public comments. But it's Freedman life, and I'm here for it, baby. I love y'all Black and Strong. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God absolutely watches over us. Wherever Freedman and its allies are, God truly is, because family, you are the face of God. You are the voice of God. You are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. Know that I love you, Black. Know that I love you, Strong. I'll see you back here, family. 1 o'clock. Don't be late. Be on time. Come on now. Let's get it. Let's go, family. Reparations. We are on the move. I love you, family. Peace, peace.